Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Rocky Mountain NetSuite user group. I'm going to go ahead and get through our general business, and then we'll get started with the main presentation a little bit later here. So this is our agenda for today, for 8:30 to 8:50. That's our welcome and general business. Then we'll hear from our meeting sponsor today, Brex, and then our main presentation from 9 to 11. And go ahead and mute yourself if you're not muted, please. I can mute you all, but self-muting is good. So our main presentation will be on SuiteAnalytics. That is presented by Ethan Haberman of Eide Bailly. And then we'll have our tip and trick from Morgan Franklin Consulting. And then after that, we'll have our open forum. Go ahead and move on here. So a little bit about our membership. I need to make this a little smaller. Sorry, hang on one second. We currently have 1,459 members as part of the user group. Membership is free. You can register at RMNSUG.org. When you register, that ensures that you get notification of upcoming meetings and events that we will be having. You also get access to our LinkedIn forum, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. And then also available is CPE credits. We do have 2 CPE credits for today's meeting. We'll talk a little bit more about the CPE credits as we go through this intro. So our LinkedIn user group forum, the purpose of our forum is to support fellow members with questions and answers. We'll follow up with Q&A from the meetings if there's things that we can't answer during the meeting. Excuse me. We also use that as our forum to post different announcements when presentations are available, the notes, discounts to SuiteWorld. And then as a member, you can also post job openings and whatnot on the user group forum. I'm going to mute everybody here. Please make sure yourself is muted. Thank you. So where to find us? You can find us on our website, RMNSUG.org. We also have a YouTube channel. You can just search RMNSUG on YouTube, and then that is the LinkedIn forum. You can also just search for RMNSUG on LinkedIn, and I believe it comes up. We are a closed forum on LinkedIn, so you do need to sign up to be a member for access to the forum. We try and keep it closed so that so that it doesn't get spammy. And then you can, so there we can post questions, answers, job openings. If you're looking for a job, all of that kind of stuff, you can post on the forum there. On our website, rmnsug.org, we record and post all of our meetings there. Also, the slide presentations and any notes or any part of the presentation is also posted on the website as well. So if you have somebody in your firm or that can't make it today and they want to watch this meeting later on, they can always attend the meeting or watch the meeting there, or you can obviously, of course, review the meeting yourself. So I'm going to take just a minute. If anybody has any announcements, you can post them in the chat window, and I will announce those. Announcements could be job openings, if you're looking for a job, anything NetSuite or user group related. I'll just take a minute here, see if anybody wants to post in the chat window. If you post later, I will announce that as well. So any announcements posted in the chat window for the meeting, you can also post those on the LinkedIn forum. Anybody? Okay. So Mike says Vertafore is hiring for a junior NetSuite administrator. And then do you have a link to an application or anything, Mike? If you do,
I do. I will post that on the chat here.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Any other announcements?
All right. Any other announcements?
Moss Adams is looking for consultants for their continually growing practice, looking for all levels. Thanks, Mike Parker, for posting. All right, we'll go ahead and move on now. If you have anything that you remember later on, feel free to post it in the chat window, and I'll try to get back to announce that later. Just real quick, I want to recognize the board for the Rocky Mountain NetSuite user group. That's me, Corey Anderson of Eide Bailly. Then we have Margie Cominos. She is our sponsorship and member chair. Margie is from PlantScan Corp. Then we have our communications chair, Mike Tackline from Vertifor. Then our speaker chair, Peggy Evleff from RSM US. And then our treasurer, Dana Larson of Dana Larson Consulting. So thank you to all the board members for continually helping keep this user group alive and presenting and adding value to the NetSuite community. There's one more announcement. Excuse me, Matthew Aiden. Becker Safety will be looking for an accounting assistant in the coming months. Okay. Thank you, Matthew. I will go ahead and move on. So evaluations, we do send out an evaluation after the meeting. Please take a few minutes to just let us know how we're doing. We do read and act on the feedback from those evaluations. Some of the most important things that we take away from that are future meeting topics. We do have a rotating schedule of topics that are the most popular topics in general, but we have a couple of slots where they are to be determined topics throughout the year. So if you have any ideas for meeting content, that's always a good place to post it. Or if there's anything that we can do better, please let us know in that evaluation. So just a reminder, please use the same email to RSVP as the email that you received the meeting invite. We try to maintain individual member records. We do use a NetSuite production account to manage the user group and all of the members of the group. So if you received an invite to the meeting with a different email addresses, please email rsvp@rmnsug.org to have the extra email addresses inactivated, and then provide the correct company name, which email should be inactivated to, please. We try and maintain individual records. I know there's some duplicates, but it throws off our counts of actual members if there's a lot of duplicates. Talk a little bit about our meeting sponsorship. Our membership to the RMNSUG is free. The cost of meetings is supported by 2 levels of sponsorship, a SuiteApp sponsor and a consulting sponsor. SuiteApp sponsors must be available through suiteapp.com, and consulting sponsors must offer NetSuite consulting services and have certified NetSuite consultants on staff. You can sign up for either sponsorship type at rmnsug.org/sponsorship. There's also detailed information there about the cost and what it entails to be a sponsor. I will go ahead and do a mute all again. Okay. Here are our upcoming meetings. Our March 2022, we have our Potpourri and 2022.1 updates. So the Potpourri is going to be a whole bunch of different topics, a little bit shorter presentations given by multiple people. We'll mostly have board members do the presentations there. And so that's kind of a fun one, just a whole bunch of different things that we'll talk about there. And then May of this year, we will come back to our workflow, also known as SuiteFlow. So our workflow meeting is usually very popular. The workflows, you'll learn how to do basic workflows and start looking at some advanced functionality workflows as well. In July is our Back to Basics meeting. So that's designed for people that are new to NetSuite that want to kind of get a high level overview of basic functionality in NetSuite, navigation, capabilities, things like that. And then in September is our NetSuite customizations meeting. And so I think we have, that's it for now for the upcoming meetings. So CPE credits, 2 CPE credits for today's meeting. The certificates will be issued within 15 days after training. If you have any problems with the CPE, you can email info@rmnsug.org. And CPE credits are sponsored by Eide Bailly. This is required for our CPE compliance. To receive CPE credit for attending today's session, you must sign in and out of the session using code words. The facilitator, me, will provide the first code word at the start of the session and then provide you a checkout code word once the session is complete. And for this purpose, session is when the content that Ethan Haberman will present, that is when we will present or post those keywords. Logging in with your computer, click the link that was provided to you in the email, and then fill out the information and enter the check-in and check-out keywords. It's a very simple process. So I'd like to take a minute to thank our consulting sponsor today. Consulting sponsor is Eide Bailly. Eide Bailly NetSuite Consulting. Eide Bailly is NetSuite's 2021 North America Solution Partner Provider of the Year. That is the 5th year in a row. We can help you with virtually anything NetSuite related. We do complete implementations, small one-off projects such as installing and configuring modules. We have on-demand support for small and large issues, ongoing consulting to optimize your business processes. We have subscription-based services offering dedicated consultants to work with you and your team. And you can contact us by going to eidebailly.com/NetSuite. So then I'd also like to say thank you to our consulting sponsor. Our consulting sponsor today is Brex. And I realize we didn't do a check for the Brex presenter, but we will find that person here, and we will go ahead and switch over to that presentation. Okay, looks good. We can see your screen. And we're just not hearing anything yet, Ethan.
Do you need to unmute him, Corey?
No, I don't think I can. You're still muted, Ethan.
Can you hear me now, Corey?
Yes, yes.
All right, excellent. Apologies for that. Apparently, the audio pin did not link into my profile, so I had to do the *6 trick here.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, great. Thanks, Ethan.
No worries. All right. Well, just going to go ahead and do a quick introduction of myself, and then we'll go ahead and hop right into our agenda here today for what we're going to be covering today around SuiteAnalytics and SuiteAnalytics Workbook. So first, what I'm going to do is just do a quick intro of myself, so you just know a little bit about me and my background and my my role as consulting at Eide Bailly. Then we're going to just do a bit of an overview on SuiteAnalytics and SuiteAnalytics Workbook, talk a little bit about what some of the cases are for when you might use this functionality, as well as you know, maybe when sometimes you might use this compared to saved searches or standard reports. Then we'll talk a little bit about some of really the core of SuiteAnalytics Workbook, and that's going to be our data set. So walk through some of the different data sets the NetSuite provides, going through some of the different manipulations you can do to your data sets, and talk a little bit about the new analytic data source that NetSuite has rolled out in the previous couple of years and is continuing to really build out and enhance. At that point, we're going to go through and actually walk through the creation or editing of existing workbooks to take you through that functionality, and then really walk through and go through the different types of views, pivots, charts and graphs and things of that nature that you'll be able to utilize, as well as going through a couple different practical use cases that you may be able to use in your own environment based on different types of organizations that you may be running inside of your NetSuite environment. And then we'll really follow or finish up on going through the ability to put some of these on dashboards. Kind of walk through being able to set up a workbook a visualization or pivot on a dashboard view, and then go through some Q&A there at the end. And if I think we've got some background noise, so if you don't mind getting on mute here, if you're not already, that would be great. Thank you. All right, so just a little bit about myself. So as Corey mentioned, my name's Ethan Haberman, and I do lead our Software and Services Center of Excellence here at Eide Bailly. And so really my role here is to provide oversight to our team of consultants that work specifically on our software and services vertical. So I've worked here at Eide Bailly for about 4 years, and really only been in this role for about the last 6 months. Previously to that, I worked as a solutions engineer, so really worked specifically in pre-sales engagements, doing demonstrations, requirements gathering, crafting statements of work, things of that nature, before moving over to the service delivery organization here in about the last 6 months. Before that, I actually worked for a service-based company that used NetSuite, went through a NetSuite implementation, so gone through an evaluation cycle and an implementation of NetSuite, and really worked in a role of IT management for that company that used NetSuite before moving into the consulting side of the house here. I'm based out of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So for those of you who aren't familiar, it's just kind of in the tiny little sliver in the northern area or panhandle of Idaho between Washington and Montana. So you can see up in the upper left, we're just we're kind of a resort lake town, and just outside of Spokane, Washington. So that's where I'm based out of. I'm married, as you can see in the top or in the middle pictures there. It's my beautiful wife Lindsay and our 2 little sons, Bennett and Wesley, 2-year-old and an almost 1-year-old. And then on the right side, you can see there we've got our 4 pets that look like they're kind of plotting a family hostile takeover. And then just a little bit last thing about myself, I also really enjoy I coach high school basketball, and so the picture there on the left is actually a picture from our spirit competition we had a couple of years ago. So that's just a little bit about my background. So it's always nice to give a little bit of an introduction to ourselves, as we're going to be spending the next little bit of time here together. So really hopping right into an overview of SuiteAnalytics and SuiteAnalytics Workbook. Really what we want to talk about is what is SuiteAnalytics Workbook? When should I use it? How do I enable it? So it is enabled in all new accounts, but in case it is not enabled in your environment, we'll just kind of quickly walk through how to get that enabled in your NetSuite environment. Talk a little bit about permissions that are required to utilize SuiteAnalytics Workbook. So it is enabled in all standard roles inside of NetSuite. But then if you are creating custom roles, or you want someone to be able to really be more of an administrator of SuiteAnalytics Workbook, kind of walk through that process here really quick. And then just talk a little bit about some of the limitations of it as well, just so that you're aware of some of those nuances there. So talking a little bit about what is SuiteAnalytics Workbook. So if you kind of look at this this visualization, this is actually taken from NetSuite and something that they presented at SuiteWorld this year. This kind of talks about the different areas of NetSuite in terms of, or the different functions that are features that you have from a reporting perspective. And really some of the features and the different times in which you may use these different features. So obviously everyone who's used NetSuite uses Save Search and Reports. So these are going to be the things that you're going to continue to use really to run the business. Your Save Searches are still going to be very valuable. You're going to use those for, doing your list views, anything from a sublist perspective. Anytime you're trying to really kind of just pull up and drive some quick operational sort of reporting, They're going to continue to use Save Searches to do things like trigger those automated emails, when certain results are edited or certain results hit your criteria. So it's still going to be very, very useful and quick and easy to use tool to be able to facilitate that sort of reporting and being able to drive those different views as you're working throughout NetSuite. So really all those similar sorts of daily processes and ops sorts of related things, you're going to continue to typically use Save Searches to help facilitate that sort of reporting. And then obviously the report writer, you're going to continue to use that for doing your financial reporting. While there is some cool things you'll be able to do moving forward here in SuiteAnalytics Workbook in terms of maybe doing some budget to actual reporting, bringing in custom dimensions and other things of that nature, with the ability to join data sets as a new feature in SuiteAnalytics Workbook. Really all of your key financial statements and things of that nature, you're going to continue to use the standard NetSuite report writer to be able to facilitate those as well. And really similar sorts of things when you're looking for just kind of a quick visibility, again, emailing and alerts, being able to drill down into data like you can do in Save Searches in your financial reports. That is really going to stay in that column there on the left in terms of managing that and where that fits in the grander scheme of reporting and analysis within NetSuite. So what we're going to be talking about today is going to be SuiteAnalytics Workbook primarily. So this is something that NetSuite's continuing to evolve and add new features to. We will talk a little bit about here in a minute what some of those new features are and highlight that as we actually hop into the product. But really, this is really used for enhanced usability. So there's going to be some sorts of features in there that aren't going to be available in Save Searches or reports, including the ability to do multi-level table joining. So I know as someone who has worked in NetSuite in the past and now consults with NetSuite, always running into issues just running standard Save Search reports where you can only get to that single level of join to those pre-joined tables that Save Searches provide for you. So the ability to really add those multi-level table joins is one of the major features and one of the things that's most powerful about these workbooks that NetSuite provide in SuiteAnalytics. Be aware of as well is that this is going to be just NetSuite data, and so you're not going to be bringing in data from other sorts of systems. It's not a a data warehouse, so to speak. This is going to be working just within NetSuite core data or any sort of custom records or additional sort of data you brought into the NetSuite database. You are going to be able to do, as you'll see today, and as you've probably seen before in previous SuiteAnalytics presentations, you are going to have that improved visualization and the ability to do those pivots and with different charts and graphs, as opposed to, as we know, we haven't had the ability to do that in the past with Save Searches and reports. And it's kind of that next step up from a reporting perspective and how it fits into the grander scheme of things is going to be the SuiteAnalytics Connect and an API. So SuiteAnalytics Connect, as you know, is if you weren't already aware, is the ODBC, essentially the ability to connect with your reporting tool of choice, whether that's Tableau or Power BI, or bringing that data into a data warehouse or a data lake. So being able to query that data either via ODBC or via API, and being able to manipulate, combine that with other sorts of data and other things of that nature. That's going to continue, obviously, as it is today. One thing that I will mention, and we'll talk about this here in a minute, is that the SuiteAnalytics Workbook is going to utilize the new analytics data source, which we're going to talk about, and that's really moving forward. NetSuite is encouraging people who are utilizing the SuiteAnalytics Connect and API to utilize this new data source as well. So the nice part about that is, in the past, as you know, the Save Search and the report writer kind of there wasn't always consistency there between, how the data sets, the underlying data sets worked, and so sometimes you could run into some inconsistencies there. So really kind of unifying that data source around this SuiteAnalytics or the analytics data source is something that's going to provide a lot of value. Now, one thing too that just on the very right side here that you'll notice is, NetSuite last year, SuiteWorld announced the analytics data, the analytics warehouse. Now, this is not something we're going to talk about today, but just kind of wanted to show this again, how it fits into the grander scheme of things. But, this is going to be even a step up from SuiteAnalytics Workbook in terms of the ability to create and analyze data with the ability to do historical snapshots. You're going to be able to bring in data from other sorts of systems as well. So it's really more of a complete business intelligence and data warehouse tool, which is obviously going to use not only NetSuite data, but data from external sources, and it does provide pre-built connectors for NetSuite and other applications. So just wanted to point that out, and I'm sure through this user group, you guys will, as that becomes more available from a kind of a testing and demonstration perspective, you'll be able to get some more insight into that as well. So really just want to talk quickly, how do I enable SuiteAnalytics Workbook? So as I mentioned before, this is something that in all new accounts it is enabled by default, but if for some reason is not actually enabled in your account, it can be enabled as simply as just going to set up company enable features. And under your Analytics tab, there's going to be a section for SuiteAnalytics Workbook. And so it's really just as simple as coming into your NetSuite environment, and then I'm in here in a NetSuite demo environment. So if I come in here to my setup company enable features, it's going to take me down into my enable features screen where I can then navigate to my Analytics tab and then enable SuiteAnalytics Workbook. You will see there is another setting here for being able to do cached data in datasets, which is going to help us from a performance standpoint, and I'll talk about that here in just a second as well. So that's really as simple as it is to enable it. If it's not enabled yet in your environment, as soon as that is enabled, you will see that this Analytics tab up here at the top or Center tab is going to be available for you to actually navigate into the data set and the workbook areas of SuiteAnalytics. So in terms of what permissions are required to use SuiteAnalytics Workbook, so there's really kind of two permissions. The first of those is the Analytics Administrator permission. And what this is going to do is it's going to enable users to delete, share, and edit workbooks and data sets created in your account. So typically, if you do not have this Analytics Administrator permission, you will only be able to manipulate your own data sets or data sets that have been shared to you, which then you would be manipulating your own copy. It would not allow you to edit, delete, or share workbooks that have not been shared to you specifically. So this is more like kind of more of an analytics administrator sort of permission that's going to allow, if you're wanting to remove or do some cleanup of workbooks or data sets that have been created in your environment, this permission is going to allow you to do that. So that administrator permission is going to give access to every workbook and every data set in the account through our analytics homepage, which we'll look at here in just a second. One thing that it is important to point out that it is, even with this analytics administrator permission, access to the fields and records is still is being honored by NetSuite permissions. So even with this permission selected to a specific role, if you go to navigate into a data set or into a workbook, you're not going to be able to see records in that you do not have, that your role does not have permissions to see. So just something to be aware of. That does not give free access to the entire systems from a permissions perspective. That is still going to honor the permissions of that specific role. As I mentioned before as well, standard use of the SuiteAnalytics workbooks and data sets, that is going to be enabled in the role by default. And so you shouldn't have to, for any of the standard roles inside of NetSuite, you shouldn't have to do any manipulations there. But if you do need to add that from a permissions perspective, then you can just go to the role, and whether it's either adding the administrator permission or just the standard user permission, that's something that you can add here right in the role. So if I were to just come here and open a role really quick, we'll just kind of take a quick second to walk you through that. If I go to my setup, users and roles, if I were to just come here and edit an existing role in my demo environment here, there's going to be really two separate areas. The administrator permission is going to be available from the under our setup tab. So if I wanted to add analytics administrator, if I go to setup, you're going to see here that I can come and add analytics administrator. There is only one permission level for that, and that is full. And then if I'm wanting to add that permission to custom role from just standard usage of the analytics workbooks, that's going to be under reports. And that's going to just be called SuiteAnalytics Workbook. You can see this role already has access, and there's just one permission level for that as well, and that is edit. So that's really as easy it is to ensure that roles in your environment, if they are custom roles, do have access to the workbook. And again, that administrator access is something that is not going to be on a role by default, something that you would just add to those specific roles via the setup menu. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that are what's new in SuiteAnalytics Workbook. And this, some of these things, have been available for several releases, but just wanted to make sure that you're aware of this because these are things that were not available in the first couple of releases. And so the first thing we want to point out is that datasets and workbooks are now going to be are now completely decoupled. So when you create a data set, that's essentially when you're going to be creating, and we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about this, it's going to be essentially all of the data that's going to be available to you within a workbook that you create. So typically we like to put as much data as we can in these, and then you can filter them when you're actually creating your pivots or your tables or your visualizations. But you do have the ability to create data sets and then reuse them among multiple workbooks. So that's something that we'll talk about here in a little bit. We also now have the ability to do calculated measures as well. So we're going to be able to perform some standard math, using our standard operators, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division on measures inside your pivot tables or charts. So now we'll highlight kind of what the difference is between a formula field and a calculated measure, and why that's relevant, and why this is a nice new feature that's available here. Now I know in listening to the previous SuiteAnalytics presentation here a couple years ago, one of the things that came up in the Q&A was conditional formatting, similar to like we could do in safe searches, where if a value met a certain criteria, then you'd be able to do conditional formatting on that. That is something that is now available, and we'll highlight that as we're going through the different visualizations. So similar to those safe searches, we are going to be able to do that conditional formatting on a column by column level in each one of those individual values. We also now have the ability to do dataset caching. So one of the, I know, complaints of SuiteAnalytics Workbook up to this point was really just, it was really not super performant when it was having to constantly query data anytime that you were querying that workbook, whether it was on a dashboard or whether you were working through that workbook. So now we do have the ability to do dataset caching. As you saw when we were just enabling those features, that's something that you can enable globally. But then actual caching of those data sets is going to be done on a per data set and a per user from that standpoint. So we'll go through that when we walk through through NetSuite. But that is something that if you're wanting to see more performant visualizations and data as you're working through that, you can enable those caches the data sets to be cached, and then those are just going to update every 60 minutes, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. A couple other things here. Also now we have the ability to export our pivot tables to CSV, but you didn't have the capability to do that before. So if you've gotten a pivot into a format that you like, that you do have the ability to export that to CSV. And then dataset linking, in my opinion, is probably one of the most powerful new features. So in the past, when you were creating a data set, you only had the ability to create a data set with a single root record. So if you think about a root record as something like a transaction or maybe an employee or something, what we have the ability to do now is actually create dataset links between multiple data sets and then combine those in a visualization. This can currently only be done via SuiteScript through what's called a dataset plugin builder, but NetSuite has announced that is going to be available in future releases. In fact, we'll talk about here in a second, but I did see in the 2022.1 release notes that this is something that will be available via the UI, assuming that they do follow through with that, as those are just in draft still. And then lastly, we do have the ability now to share workbooks and share data sets. So you can share to specific roles or specific employees. So if you did get a data set or a workbook into a way that you wanted to be able to share that out to your team, we do have the ability to share those out. Now, and then just lastly, talking a little bit about some of the limitations. And this is something that is kind of really been since the beginning. Some ad blockers can break functionality of SuiteAnalytics Workbook, so I would encourage you to add your NetSuite environment into an exception list from an ad blocker perspective. There is also a bug in which if you have multiple pivot tables or charts in a single workbook, sometimes the UI doesn't always display the arrows so that you can switch between each table and chart. So that is another bug. It's kind of more of a pain than kind of a functional gap or getting incorrect data or anything of that nature, but it is something that I wanted to point out here as well. And then there is actually a little bit more of a comprehensive list that NetSuite provided, nothing probably worth noting just in our presentation today, but that is something that you can review this, when you get the copy of the slide deck too, if there's additional things you wanted to review there. All right, so let's talk a little bit about data sets and the analytics data source. So let's talk a little bit first about what is the analytics data source. So when we think about what data sources are, it's really going to be a collection of data that's structured and grouped according to our different record types and fields inside of NetSuite. This new analytics data source has been available since 2019.1. And can also be used by SuiteAnalytics Connect, as I was mentioning earlier. This is now often referred to as NetSuite2.com data source if you're referring to it from like SuiteAnalytics Connect. SuiteScript and REST web services also can utilize this data source. And this is something that NetSuite does provide you a records catalog, which I'll show you here in a second, so that you have the ability to really see all of the records, all of the fields, all of the joins, kind of similar to the old schema browser that NetSuite provides, so that you have a clear idea of kind of how all of the data fits together, what types of fields are they, where do those joins sit, and things of that nature. There is also the ability to do SuiteQL. So you can generate complex SQL queries against your NetSuite data from this data source. So that is something that you have the ability to do as well. And that's something very powerful, especially if you have in-house database administrators or people that are familiar with SQL. That is something that you have the ability to connect and do queries against SuiteAnalytics Connect, so via ODBC, through the nQuery module in SuiteScript, and then also, again, through the SuiteTalk REST web services. So it's a very powerful way of being able to handle that. I'm going to hop over into NetSuite here really quick, and then just show you here the records browser. So if I click on Setup, and then if you scroll all the way down on your Setup tab, this is where you're going to see this records catalog. So again, this is where you're going to be able to have and see all of the different root records, see where all of those different joins sit, things of that nature. So if I were to come in here, maybe let's just start at transaction. So if I click on T here, I can look down to transaction, and this is where it's going to show all of the fields that are available for me to utilize when I'm using transaction as my root record. So it's going to give me what those field IDs are, what the actual common name is of those, what type of field is it? So, is it a string? Is it a date? Is it an integer? And then are there any sorts of joins that are going to be a part of these? So we're going to be able to see any of those joins that exist over here on the right side, so that you have the ability to kind of see any of those linked tables. Anywhere you see a join here, you're going to be able to add that in your data set when you're creating those data sets for use in your workbooks. And then just quickly get on SuiteQL. And I actually, funny enough, I saw in the chat that Tim Dietrich was going to be presenting on this in a future meeting here. And so I'm not going to really go into this, but I was actually planning to show you the tool that he had created, and a query tool, which you actually have the ability to edit queries, run them right from the NetSuite user interface. He's just done a phenomenal job of really bringing this sort of functionality to those of us who are not coders, are not scripters like myself. So having the ability to come in here and use this SQL syntax to be able to come in, run queries, export them, do things of that nature. So again, I'm not going to steal his thunder, and 150% of the credit goes to him. But I just was going to say this is an example of being able to query that NetSuite data utilizing that SuiteQL on this analytics data source that we're going to be utilizing in our NetSuite SuiteAnalytics workbooks today. All right. So talking a little bit more about data sets in our workbooks. So our data sets are really going to define what records, what joins, and what fields are going to be available to us in our workbooks. Really, data sets are really going to be the basis for all of our workbooks, all of our visualizations in your account. And if you think about really what is a data set in this context, and just think of it really as a query. Just like you would be running a save search, it's going to be your query on what data you want to be included in that data set, and really what root record we're going to be used to start, and we can then build all of our joins from there. There are some data sets that are actually specific to SuiteAnalytics Workbook. So if there are a few that NetSuite has provided, like a sales invoiced or sales ordered, which aren't technically a root record in NetSuite, but something that they've actually just provided as a data set and kind of pre-done some joins or added some of those fields into really more of a predefined data set, as opposed to you really having to go out and build a data set from scratch, like on a transaction root record. So that's really kind of the fundamentally what a data set is. It's just a query where you get to define what all of those all of the data that sits inside of that data set that we're then going to use inside of our workbooks, whether it's in our pivots or visualizations or things of that nature. Now, NetSuite does provide a fair amount of data set templates for us to be able to utilize without having to build them, some of those things on our own. So there's about 25 of them here. I'm not going to go into all of them in detail. These will typically be available in your NetSuite environment, depending on really kind of what's enabled in your account. So, for instance, this recurring revenue data set that you see right here, that's something that's going to be available, if you have suite billing. So that's something that's kind of more tied to subscription records. Other things like warehouse inventory. So if you're using advanced inventory or your distribution companies and you have those modules or those features enabled in your account, that's something that you're going to be able to leverage there. So I would encourage you, if you are not seeing some of these data set templates in your environment and you feel like you should, based on the functionality of the modules that are included in your NetSuite environment, I would definitely recommend you reach out to either your NetSuite account manager or whoever you're working with from a consulting perspective, and that could be something that just hasn't been shared to your account or something that should be able to be brought in there. So you still always have the ability to obviously build any of these data sets from scratch as you need, but if you do want to be able to utilize some of these these predefined data set templates from NetSuite, that's something that you can use as more of a starting point. All right. So wanting to talk just quickly about transactional data and some of the implications that there are there when you're thinking about how you're going to be utilizing SuiteAnalytics Workbook. So as you know, with saved searches, all the transactions are stored really in one record type. And that's just going to be the transaction. Now, while we have the ability to filter to main line or not, based on whether we're wanting to see line item detail or if we're wanting to see header detail, fundamentally, all of those transactions are just stored in a single record type. Now, SuiteAnalytics Workbook has taken a different approach, which actually has given us a significantly more flexibility in which they are actually broken out into 3 different record types. So the transaction is going to be kind of the root or the core of that. And that's going to be, think of that as your main line in the context if you're running saved searches. So that's going to have all of your summary information, like your customer name, date, your transaction totals, and any of those things that you would typically see at the header of a transaction. Now, because these are really in 3 different record types, we're going to be doing joins between the transaction and the transaction line to be able to facilitate, getting to that transactional line detail. And you're going to see here there's actually 2 separate transaction line records here that you're going to have access to that you can join to. Excuse me, just real quick, I'm going to grab a quick drink here. So your transaction line, this is going to have your line level information, and it's going to have your line amounts in the transaction currency. And it's also going to give you those joins to things like the item record. Because the item is on that line level, you're going to be able to do a join to the item record and get any information that is going to be on the item record from there. So that's going to be a join that you're going to be able to add. But it's important to note here that the biggest difference between the transaction line and the transaction accounting line is going to be how it's managed from a currency perspective. So our transaction accounting line is going to give us our accounting line level info. So our amounts are going to be in the base currency of the subsidiary, and it's going to have a join to something more like the GL account record. So because this is more accounting related, and we're going to have access to the GL account this is posting to, that's what our natural join would be there. And I'll go talk a little bit about this on the next slide, but because obviously we have one world environments and multi-book environments, we could actually have multiple transaction accounting lines for a single transaction line because of differences in currencies and things of that nature. So those are really the 3 records or record types that are going to be available for a single transaction, and having those broken out into separate tables really gives us, or separate records gives us a huge amount of flexibility in terms of how we're going to display that when we're getting into visualizations and pivots and things of that nature. And so really kind of what this looks like from this perspective is that this is kind of what that data structure, looks like. So on the very left here, like if, again, we're talking specifically about transactions, our total amount, entity, date, other things of that nature, again, header level or mainline sorts of fields we're going to have there. That's going to have a one-to-many relationship to our transaction line. So that's where we're going to see that that amount, again, in the transaction currency, because that is the actual currency that's designated on that specific transaction, irregardless of the base currency that you're working in. And then you'll have joins to things like the location or the item or other things of that nature. So you can see here, as we've indicated this join, if we wanted to know what is that item standard purchase price, or what's the item type, or maybe the other sorts of fields that you may want to pull from your item. And then lastly, you'll see here, we could have either a one-to-one in our single subsidiary accounts or a one-to-many in our multi-subsidiary accounts for our transaction accounting lines. So this is where we're going to, again, see our amount. We're going to see our GL account, because that's what's going to be tied to the actual GL as opposed to just, the amount in our base currency there. and then we're going to have that natural join we're going to be able to make to our GL account. So if we're wanting to pull information about that by like maybe account type or other things of that nature, that's a join that we're going to be able to have there. So it is important, and NetSuite has a whole kind of Suite Answers article and video on this in terms of how this relationship or how these relationships function and why they're important. But just something to be aware of, because if you, depending on how you structure your workbooks, you could end up with some data issues or duplication depending on kind of how you structure this. So again, if you're wanting to look at things just in your base currency of a transaction, you'll be able to use the transaction line as opposed to the currency of the subsidiary. We would use our transaction accounting line. And there's some conversion that we can do, which you'll see here as we're working through actually getting into the workbooks. All right, so just want to talk quickly about cached data sets. As I mentioned before, I really feel like this was really one of the, kind of one of the most powerful, well, this and the dataset linking is going to be one of the most, I think, one of the better new features that are available here. So again, I know a common complaint in the past has going to been response time and the performance of these SuiteAnalytics workbooks. And so being able to enable these datasets to be cached is going to allow you to essentially not have to query the database every time that you're actually running one of these visualizations or pivot tables or tables or things of that nature. So I'll show you here in a second how those are enabled. But really, again, these are going to be able to be done on a dataset by dataset basis, and then also a user by user basis, so that it kind of leaves those preferences up to individual users. The analytics administrator can have the ability to kind of go in and look and see what all of the different data set caches look like. So that if you see, all of the different ones that are there, if they're ones that are stale or ones that you can disable because you don't need them anymore, you have the ability to come in there and essentially disable that because it's no longer needed. So if I were just to hop over back into NetSuite here really quick, if I were to pop into analytics here and go to my data sets, we're going to see here, if I click on these three dots over on the right side when I'm looking at my different data sets, we're going to see I have dataset cache management. So obviously I'm logged in as administrator, so I'm inherently an analytics administrator. I can see any of the different data sets that are out there, what the workbook names are, who the user is that has cached that data, when's the last time that refresh has been completed, is this in an active or inactive status, when's the last time that it was used. This will indicate, again, if it was used in the last 30 days. And then we can come in here and actually disable the dataset cache for any of these here. So one thing it's worth mentioning is that, as I mentioned, because these are cached, these are going to be updated every 60 minutes. And so since they're updated every 60 minutes, I guess the one caveat to this is if you're looking for real-time data that's quicker than 60 minutes, that's something that it's just not going to be there until you actually go in and you can refresh it. But that is something that, if you're just doing analysis that doesn't need, more than that sort of thing, or update frequency, definitely cache data sets are going to be the way to go from a performance perspective. You do have the ability to here filter too, if you're wanting to type in a data set name or a user or filter by status, you can come in here and do any of those filters. And I apologize, the status is actually either active or if it's in progress of being refreshed from a data set perspective. So that's where you can actually manage that from an analytics administrator perspective. It's just by going into your data sets and then going to your data set cache management.
Hey, Ethan, there's a question about, is it possible to adjust the 60-minute refresh time frame per data set?
Not that I'm aware of. Anything that I've seen has indicated that 60 minutes is going to be is not editable, and so that is hard coded at 60 minutes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and hop into our data sets here and again, kind of go through a demo of manipulating an existing data set so that we can you can get a little bit more insight into that. And actually, before we do that, I want to talk a little bit more about our data set linking here. So as I was mentioning when we were talking about new features, dataset linking is something that was just introduced in 2021.2, so our most recent release. So if you think about this, any two data sets that have a field that is the same, essentially a field that you can use to link those data sets together. Those are data sets that you can join and then use the fields that from either one of those data sets in your pivots, your tables, or your visualizations. So this is going to really allow you to complete complex analysis that uses data which is not typically joinable from a single data set. So think about kind of a common use case here is going to be budget versus actual. So obviously in NetSuite, budget is its own unique record, as is any of the actuals are going to be coming from transactions. Obviously whether they're invoices or bills or journals or whatever sorts of things are coming through, those are going to be pulled from our transaction data set as opposed to our budget data set. Now in the past, we haven't had the ability to link these two together. But now with the dataset linking, that's functionality we'll be able to do here. So in this example here, and again, this is something that came from NetSuite's presentation at Suite World this year. You can see here that this is an example of combining a transaction data set and an employee data set. And what they've used as their linkage field here is going to be date created. So when you look at data set up here on the top, this is where you can actually see where we've linked these two data sets together, whereas typically in the past, all you've been able to have is a single data set there. As I mentioned earlier as well, in its initial release in 2021.2, this linking can be created in SuiteScript only. You cannot link two data sets in the workbook UI, but that is something, again, that I'll show you kind of a screenshot here of what NetSuite's shown that is hopefully going to be available in our release coming up here in the coming months. One thing too, and again, I am not a developer, and so my scripting or any sort of coding that is done is typically trying to reverse engineer code that anybody else has already done. But this is an example the NetSuite has provided. So it's really only about 20 lines of code in terms of if you did need to do this. The NetSuite provides what's called a Dataset Builder plugin, where you essentially are going to define the data sets that you're wanting to create, via SuiteScript, and then you're going to essentially define what your different columns are, and then what you're using to join those columns. So, pretty much any standard NetSuite developer would be able to help you use this Dataset Builder plugin. It is documented on NetSuite's help and Suite Answers in terms of being able to build this. And so you're going to be able to do this, until at which point you want to be able to do that via the UI. Additionally, there are use cases obviously where you're not going to be doing it via the UI, and so there's obviously going to be this use case moving forward even after the new feature comes out where you don't have to script to do it. So that's just an example there of just kind of a standard Dataset Builder plugin via SuiteScript. But this, again, for the 95% of us who are not developers, is going to be essentially what that interface would look like from a NetSuite perspective. So if I'm wanting to combine data sets, I'm going to do this data set linking right here from my workbook. So you can see here kind of on the top left, I have a data set here for budget, for actuals, and then for data set 2 here, I'm going to have my data set for budget. And so essentially what I'm doing here is I'm bringing these two data sets in together, and then I'm going to define what my common keys are. So I'm going to have common keys for posting period and common keys for department, because I'm going to want to run a budget to actual by period, by department. So if we look at, essentially that would be how we build our dataset link from the UI. And then on this bottom right, this is then where we're going to be able to bringing that data. And in this example, it's showing it in just kind of a basic pivot, which is just showing our posting periods here on the left. It's showing the, what our sales here are on the, in this column, what our sales budget was, and then just doing a simple formula field to calculate our variance there. So that's really kind of what that process would look like. And again, I feel like this is going to introduce something that we've really lacked in NetSuite, kind of from a core functionality perspective, for a really long time, having the ability to come in here, link data sets with the fields that you want to link to, and then be able to pull those into visualizations and or pivots and tables to be able to compare and combine data from multiple record types. So something I'm very excited about. A couple things just to consider though, however, from our dataset linking perspective. So linking is defined in the workbook. So we're not building linked datasets like in our dataset area. We're going to be doing it from our workbooks. And when you do that, they're going to be available in all the different tabs of our workbooks. You can use these linked datasets in any pivots and charts. One thing just kind of from a data structure perspective also to be aware of is that only linked fields should be used as dimensions, so as your rows or columns, because if we use non-linked dimensions, you could have a data mismatch, because that data, if you think about it, is really only going to exist in one of those data sets. So obviously our measures are going to be different, but we would see data differently in different columns if we're putting in our dimensions, so our rows or columns, those fields that are not linked when we create that data set link. And then just one other thing to note, as of at least our current release, any filters that you may need to be applied would need to be applied on both data sets to be reflected correctly in our visualization there. So just a couple of notes there. Another thing just before we hop into the demo is our data set sharing. So this is something that is a new feature as well, the ability to share data sets. And so you can share data sets and workbooks, for that matter, to either specific roles or individual users. The permissions for the underlying transactions, again, those are going to be honored when those are shared. So if you share something to somebody and they don't have access to those transactions or those records, they're not going to be able to see those. So it's not something you have to worry about from a data security perspective. And the analytics administrator can see all of the saved data sets. So that is something that they can go in there and review, remove stale records and things of that nature. So that is something that the analytics administrator does have the ability to see. So this is just a screenshot, of the shared data set. But if I were to hop back into NetSuite again here really quick, if I go to my data sets, if I wanted to come in here, all I have to do again is hit my 3 arrows on something that I may want to share. So if let's say I have my transactions data set that I'd created, I actually want to share that. It's just as simple as really clicking on share there. Again, you can select between roles and employees on who you want to share those with. So I could come and say, you know what, I want to share this with Abby and Blake. Just a matter of selecting that you want to share with them. And so as soon as I share that, as soon as they go in and log in and they click on their analytics and go to their data sets, they're going to see that data set there. And it's actually going to show that that's been shared with them. So that is something that is a new feature, and it's nice for you to be able to, if you wanted to get a data set with all of the data that you wanted on it and share that out to team members, you have the ability to do that. Again, if they go ahead and make a bunch of changes to your data set, that's not going to affect your data set that you've shared. Your copy of it, I guess your root copy of it, it's only going to affect, the one that you've shared with them and kind of their personal copy of that, so to speak. So they're not going to be able to mess up what you've created there from that perspective. Now, if I were to come back to here as well and click on share, you're going to see here, I'll be able to come and see, any of these that are shared already. So, it's obviously going to maintain that, and you're going to be able to see it's not just a one-time share where it's going to share into them and kind of lose insight that those have been shared to specific roles or specific employees in your NetSuite environment. All right, so let's hop back here really quick.
Hey, Ethan, a question that came up is when you share, does NetSuite create a copy of the data set? You had mentioned about editing and it doesn't edit your copy.
Yeah, so that's going to create a copy. So that's so yeah, I guess for back of a letter term, that is going to be a copy, and so that is not something that it's going to be their own individual copy of that data set.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go ahead and actually take a look at some data sets here. So again, if I'm back in NetSuite here, looking at my data sets. If I wanted to come in here, I can filter what I'm seeing, by just my data sets that have been shared with me, or maybe just templates that are provided by NetSuite. You can see here that we have the ability to kind of filter between those, or if you wanted to search for a data set, obviously you can use the search function up here at the top. So let's go ahead and just look at my transactions as our initial data set here. And I'm going to come here by the one from the system. If I click on details here, this will actually kind of just give me a quick insight into what's going on in this data set. So I can see here my root record is transaction. This script ID, if I'm wanting to query this in SuiteScript, you're going to have the ability to do that. When was the last time it was opened? When was the last time that it was modified? And then I can see all of the different fields here that are in this data set, and then any of the criteria. So this is sitting in my transactions. So the criteria you can see they put by default is, just show me transactions that were created by me and transactions that are in the last year. We can go in and we can manipulate this, but that is what this looks like right now. So we're going to go ahead and open our data set here. And actually, before I do that, I just want to show you quick too, creating a new data set. If I were to do that, it's just a matter of clicking on new data set, allowing us to set the root record. And so if I'm wanting to create a transaction data set or data set, I can just start typing in here, say, all right, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a transaction data set. Maybe I'm wanting to create a data set on fixed assets. I can just type in asset here, and I'm going to come here, create a base data set based on our fixed asset custom record. And again, any custom records you create in your environment are going to show here as well. So there's about 500, at least in my environment, about 525 root records. Don't let that intimidate you. A lot of these are ones you'll probably never touch, and you can actually kind of sort by the kind of type of record. So you can see here, these are all based on custom records versus standard records. You're going to be able to see what those record IDs are. So you're going to often, either be looking at master data, customers, vendors, employees, or transactional data. And so you're probably going to just use a very small subset of these transactions for your root records as you're creating your data sets. But these are all going to be available for you, as you're going to create a new data set.
Hey, Ethan, we have a question. Are the actual data sets shared or just the metadata that defines the data set?
That is actually a good question. I don't know that for sure. That's something that I'd have to follow up on. But my understanding is that it's really because it's just essentially a layer that's telling NetSuite what to query. My assumption would be it's really just kind of the metadata on what to query. But that's something that I'd have to follow back up to give you a firm answer on.
And let me follow up with my own question, Ethan. So if you have a data set and you share it with someone and you make changes to it, it made it sound like you basically did a share copy so that what changes you make to the data set won't affect what you've shared with them because they're able to make changes that don't come back to you. Can you help me understand Is it kind of like a save as copy they have, and then they make their own changes, you make changes, and it doesn't affect theirs?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dana. That is my understanding. But again, that's actually not a specific use case that I've gone into. So I can absolutely test that and kind of get back to the group on that. But that would be my understanding.
I thought I tested it. I didn't test it thoroughly, but I was sharing a data set with someone, and I believe if I went in and changed it and then shared it again, went into the share and just said share, I think that it shared the changes, because then they were able to do what they wanted to do. But again, I have not thoroughly tested that, so that would be interesting to know. But thank you, Ethan.
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
Dana, to your add-on, but if they made changes to their copy and then you shared it again, wouldn't they lose all their changes?
No. Yeah, in my case, they weren't making changes to the data set at all. I was just sharing it. They were making changes to workbooks that were using that data set. And so we didn't test that, but that's also a good question, Margie, if it overwrites anything. See, I would think if they make changes to a data set, when they do the save, they would do a save as, because it now becomes their own. Just like doing a save search and giving it to somebody, you're still the owner. And if they make changes, they have to do save as. And so I think it's a save as if they make changes, and then our updates would only be to the original one. That's my gut feeling on it. You know, it's all about the gut. You know. Okay.
Yeah. good thing for us to test.
Okay.
Thanks, Dana. So let's go ahead and open our My Transactions data set here. And we're just gonna play around in this data set a little bit before we hop into our actual workbooks here. So this is gonna load here. Just kind of a few things here from a navigation perspective. So you can see here, first of all, I'm working on a system template. So you're going to see this is going to be categorized as a template up here. If I make changes to this data set, I'm going to do a save as, because we're kind of just like a NetSuite report writer. If you go and run an income statement, you know, that core system template is always going to be there, and you're going to do save as. Now that's different. Obviously, once you create your own data set, you can just do a common save as opposed to a save as. But here, since this is based on a template, we would be doing a save as to create our own copy of this. You will see also from a caching perspective, we're saying right now we're looking at real-time response, and we can actually say when our most recent refresh has taken place. So if I'm wanting to come in here, and let's just go ahead and do a save as. Just do this here. So now we've got our own copy of our data set here. It's reloading our data. You can see here we're still looking at real-time response. Now, if I'm wanting to kind of switch this into a cached data set, it's just a matter of coming in here, switching this to cached, hitting apply, and now we can see it's enabling our cached response. So right now it's actually going in the background, building out my cache here. We can see again here, just because I just created this is showing my my most up-to-date data, because obviously we just created this data set. And then as soon as this finishes actually enabling my cache, then we'll see here that that it is actually, we're looking at our cache data. If I were to highlight over here, we can see here actually when the data set was refreshed. And then if I wanted to ever switch it back, I could switch back to real time. And if I wanted to refresh, I could do that right here. So those are some things that you can do there from that cache perspective. Just for our usages right now, I'm going to switch back to real-time response. So just some other things here from a navigations perspective. So, a couple of things, as I was mentioning before, really when we're building our data sets or editing existing data sets, we really want to populate this with as much data as we think we would ever need as we're going to start building out our tables, our pivots, and our visualizations. And so, you can always filter things once you get to that level. And so really we want to get as much data in here as we want, or as we can. so a couple things that you'll see here on the left. So the left is going to be essentially everywhere that I can add fields to my data set or add fields from joins on my data set. So if I'm wanting to come in here, and I can actually use a search by name or by ID up here on the top left. So this is where I'm going to be able to do that. You'll see we do have 2 columns here though. So everything on here that we can add are going to be our different records that we can join to, but then everything that's going to be in this pane here is going to be the fields that we can add based on the current record that we're selected to. So we're still at our root record here, and so we can see here, we have all of the fields here in blue that are already a part of our data set. If we actually click on this info, you'll see here that this transaction, that's our root record, and what we can actually toggle here if we're wanting to kind of get rid of some of the noise and display only the records that are currently showing on here. So because we haven't linked any records to this yet, there's nothing showing here, but then we can just toggle this so that we can see all of our records again. So if I'm wanting to start adding some fields, this is where we can just start adding some different records. So maybe if I'm wanting to add created by employee and add something to my data set here. Maybe I wanted to add the employee supervisor or something of that nature. All I would have to do is say created by employee. And as soon as I click on that, you're going to see everything on here is going to change to that record now that I've selected. So if I wanted to say, all right, well, I want to add the supervisor of the employee to my data set here. I can just go ahead and drag this over. And I can either drag this over into my results field, or I can, looks like I chose subsidiary instead of supervisor. So you can see here, to remove a column, you just hit the 3 dots up top there and say remove column. And let's go ahead and grab our correct field here in supervisor. Now, right now, because my criteria is set to just show transactions that were created by me, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this criteria. So criterias, and I'll show you some complex ones here in a little bit. But this one's just a very basic one. You can do expressions just like you can do in save searches, and you can create groups. Kind of if you think about being able to do in save searches of having our ands or ors, and then also putting things in parentheses to be able to indicate multiple conditions. That's something that we can do here. So if we wanted to add a criteria group, we can do that as well. And those groups can have ands or ors between those criteria groups as well, which I'll show you here in a little bit. So I'm going to get rid of this because I just, yeah, go ahead.
One quick question on the chat. How significantly do these functions affect concurrency? And Murphy, you may want to unmute and explain which functions you're talking about specifically. All right, we can come back to it unless you want to talk about the performance, but maybe you did talk about that with, whether you have them refresh all the time, but okay, we'll wait and see if there's a column.
Okay, sounds
Thanks.
good. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and remove these criteria just so we kind of have more data in our data set for this point. So I've removed my criteria now. If I wanted to add additional criteria, so maybe I'm wanting to see everything for just my created by employees supervisor. So what I could do here is if I wanted to come in here, and as soon as I add a field to my data set here, you're going to see it moves here to the top and puts it into blue. So if I wanted to say I want to add this to criteria, I could say I want only to show transactions for employees that have a supervisor of whoever. That's just something that I could then add there as a criteria. So that now, because this employee is a linked field, if I were to come in here and say only display records that are linked to this, you can see here now I have my join to created by employee. So that's just something that is going to naturally show up there as soon as you add a linked table. Now, since we're looking at transactions, maybe we're going to wanting to start looking at some other sorts of data here. so let's add some other sorts of things. We have posting period in here. That's great. Maybe we want to add terms, the terms of the transaction. So we can just start typing in here terms. You can see here terms. This is going to be up here for my root record. And then we can see terms that are all of these other sorts of records here as well. And so actually, so sorry, this terms is my actual record. But then these are going to be the fields where terms have shown up from a search perspective. So I want to actually look at terms for my transaction. So let's just go ahead and drop that over here. And maybe I want to add the billing address, the state of the billing address. So if I come back here, back to my transaction and a billing address, because that's another table inside of NetSuite, I can click on that. That's going to bring up my link table here, and I'm going to drag my state over here. So that's just kind of an example of adding a couple of fields. Again, if we had multiple joins, you can continue to come down from your record to get to those additional joins. So if we were looking at, again, talking about transactions, and we're wanting to look at, things like transaction lines, you can see here, transaction line. That's going to show me all of those different things that we talked about earlier that are going to be specific to the line items on a specific transaction. And if I go ahead and expand this out, you're going to see here, that's where I'm going to see my transaction accounting line. So that's another join. If I then wanted to get to the account of that transaction accounting line, then that's another join. So now if I wanted to say, maybe I want to get to the account type of the transaction line, transaction accounting line, that's something I could just come in here and say, I want to add the account type. So you can see here, we went 1, 2, 3, essentially 4 joins deep from our original transaction to get to the account type of our accounting transaction line there. Excuse me. So that's kind of an example of adding some different fields to our data set. If we wanted to add, again, some additional criteria, we could do that. Maybe if we wanted to filter just to a specific transaction type, if we wanted to come back to our transaction and then come to transaction type, and maybe just more easily typing in type in here, we can look at transaction type. Maybe you want to add that as a criteria. You could say, you know what, I want to only show sales orders or multiple transaction types. You can then also do, none of, just like you can do in save searches, but we're going to just say any of sales order. Again, I probably wouldn't recommend putting this in a criteria because we can always filter this once we get into our actual visualizations, and it's really going to kind of limit us. But that's just a very simple example of adding criteria to this. To this, and maybe I do want to add one to say, you know what, sometimes we have $0 sales orders in there for whatever reason. I don't care about seeing those. It's just going to muddy up my data set. So for my amount field, I'm going to go ahead and total amount on my transaction. I want to have that not equal to 0. Go ahead and apply that. So now we have just a couple simple criteria. We've added a few linked fields to our data set. We're going to go ahead and save our data set here. And that's really as simple as to take an existing data set, make some manipulations to it, go ahead and save it. And now we are going to be able to go and actually create something from this data set. So if we were going to be editing an existing data set and there were workbooks that were referencing that existing data set, the system's going to warn us and let us know that we have those that are, it's just essentially going to pop up a message to say, warning, there are workbooks that are using this existing data set. Essentially, if you remove columns or fields from this data set, it could mess up your visualizations or things inside of your workbook. So just something to be aware of if you are editing existing data sets, that the system will let you know if those are linked to existing workbooks to make sure that you don't remove any fields or make manipulations to that's going to break your existing workbooks. So if we wanted to create a quick pivot for, from this, and we're not going to go into this too in depth because we're going to go into, use some existing data sets for our other workbooks. But if I wanted to create a new workbook from this data set, all I'd have to do is click that Create Workbook view or button there, and it's going to come and ask me, what kind of data set do I want to create. So if I just were to want to create a quick pivot here, let's just say, I wanted to come in here and I'm going to group things by my supervisor here. So for my rows, I'm going to come in here and put in my supervisor. For my measures, I'm going to be coming in and putting our total transaction amount. And then for columns, I'm going to go ahead and let's just say I'm going to put in our date here. And say everybody here is has a supervisor of Larry Nelson. And so actually that's probably not a very good way to see it. So why don't we go back and edit our data set really quick, which I can do very easily by just clicking on my data set up here, clicking on Open Data Set, and then I can go ahead and change this. Say, you know what, actually, I want to see the created by just the employee as opposed to the employee supervisor. So if I come in here, I can come and put it created by. Let's go ahead and add that back to our data set. Let's go ahead and save our data set now that we've made that change. I'm still going to have most of these because it is a demo set created by Catherine Glass. Go ahead and apply that. If I go back to my workbook now, we're going to see that I do have the ability to come in here and add created by. So let's go ahead and remove our supervisor. And I can just hit the trash can to do that. And then just add created by to our rows here. So we can see here now we have some, just a kind of a really quick pivot on our created by transactions by year, by total transaction amount. One thing you will see, because we are looking at total transaction amount, and we're not getting down to an accounting line or anything of that nature, we're going to have multiple currencies in here because they could have created transactions in multiple currencies. So one of the things that we accommodate for when we're talking about multiple currency is we're going to have the ability to, and in some cases are going to be forced to, apply conversions. So if I come in here to currency and apply conversion, what that's going to do is it's going to convert all of these to US dollars here. So now we can, instead of having those three different lines there for that dollar amount, we're going to have those each shown there. One thing you'll see here as well is when I added date, you can see here it defaulted to adding the year. One thing that it's going to do is it's going to actually break this out so that you have the ability to add year, quarter, month, and day. And so those are all different things that we can use from a kind of from a date perspective. So it really kind of breaks all that out. So if I'm wanting to say, you know what, instead of seeing things by year, I want to see things by month. So I'm going to go ahead and remove my year and my quarter and my day, and then it's going to actually just refresh this visualization to show month only. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you kind of manage those date fields, because they're always going to allow you to expand out, as broadly as year, but then go down to quarter, month, and even down to day. So that's just kind of a quick, easy pivot. We'll get into some more details and pivots here when we hop into the workbooks a little bit more in depth. And one thing that I wanted to just go back to really quick before we switch gears there is that if I wanted to come back in here, just kind of getting back to our data set perspective before we kind of get into the workbooks, and we'll probably do a quick break before then, is if I wanted to come back into my data set, and let's go ahead and get things down to our specific line item information. So if I come back to my data set here, if I wanted to add some transaction line information, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my transaction line table, and let's go ahead and add our items here. So we do have obviously should have items on everything because we're looking at sales orders, but let's go ahead and add our item. let's go ahead and also add our class of our item. So if I were to come in here to our item, our transaction line, our item table, again, that's a linked table. So I can come in here and pull the class from that. I could also pull it from the transaction line since it's stored there as well, but let's just say maybe sometimes those get overridden. We wanted to pull it from the actual item record. We'll go ahead and add our class. And you can see here we're going to have some duplicates, excuse me, and that's because we're still looking at both our main line and our individual transaction lines. So if I wanted to come in here, what I could do is I could come back to my transaction and say for main line, let's see here. Yeah, there we go, main line. I'm going to add that to my criteria. And I'm going to say I don't want that to be main line. I only want to look at my individual line item detail. So then if we were to actually apply this and go back to my workbook, we'll just go ahead and save. We're going to apply to workbook. And actually, let's add one more thing here. Let's add sales rep. Lost my mouse there for a second. Sales rep for my transaction. And then I'm going to do actually one more thing here. I'm going to add a formula. So you can see here, if I get rid of my search here at the top, I'm going to have the ability to come in and add a formula. And I'm going to use this an example. And this one just came right off of SuiteAnswers. And so just kind of a sample example that NetSuite uses. But what I want, if I want to do here, is create just a simple case statement. Well, maybe it's not that simple, but a little case statement for me to understand what season this was, this sales order took place in. So if I wanted to come in here and come and name this, let's just call it season, and then putting in a simple formula. And this is going to be just a string, so it's going to be free text. And I'm just going to put in a simple case statement that says, if the transaction date is in December, I'm going to call it winter. If the transaction date's in June, I'm going to call it summer. If not, I'm going to consider that in fall or spring. I can come in here and click validate. It's going to come in there and validate that I have a valid formula, I guess, so to speak. I'll go ahead and hit save. So now you can see here I have a new formula field that's just called season. I can go ahead and drag this down. Could also add that as a filter if I wanted to, but we're going to go ahead and do this. So you can see here, we're going to see the ones that it was in fall or spring. You can see these ones were done in December, so it's showing these as winter. So just kind of a pretty simple case statement to be able to come in here and add some additional data into our data set that's going to then be able to be used inside of a visualization or a pivot or a table. So we'll go ahead and apply this to our workbook. And so now you can see we're going to have all of these things are going to be available now inside our visualization now. So now if I wanted to, let's go ahead and say I want to remove my created by, and let's go ahead and add our sales rep here. And as a filter, because I'm going to remove date. Let's say we don't care about date anymore. And as a filter, let's go ahead and add our season. Or I could even show that as a column if I wanted to. So if I dropped in season into a column, you're going to see here now I'm going to have my amount transactions by sales rep, by season. Or these ones just saying was fall or spring. So it's kind of a quick and dirty formula there where we can added a few more things. If I wanted to, add additional filters, let's say I want to filter by the class of my items that are being sold. What I can do here is I can just hit the triple dot right there and say, I want to filter by class. And I'm going to say, I want to see only our class A, which is our very creative class naming structure here in our demo environment. So you can see here now it's going to show us we have a filter applied. We can see here by sales rep, by season, the dollar amounts of our booked orders from our sales order transactions. All right. So that is kind of just a recap on data sets. I know, Corey, you had mentioned maybe wanting to take a break partway through here. Would now be a good time for that?
Yep, I think now would be a great time for that. So let's go ahead and just take a 5-minute break.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll make this quick. I want to apologize for our scheduling snafu first and foremost, but I promise I'll keep this exciting and engaging, and everybody at the end of this 10 minutes is going to be super excited about Brex and our relationship with Rocky Mountain NetSuite User Group. So my name is Samantha, and I manage channel partnerships here at Brex. I've been with the company for just about 3 years now, so quite some time in the startup world. Quickly, what we're going to go over today is a little bit of background on Brex. You know, like why do we exist? What is our story? Why did we come to be? And frankly, why are we talking to a group of NetSuite users, right? A little bit more about our products and how to work with us. I know we have a really diverse group on the line today, both NetSuite users, implementation specialists, accountants, and so I'd love to shed a little bit of light of how you can work more closely with us. And then we might not have time for a Q&A today, but I'm available to answer any questions async or via email at any time. So a little bit of context here is Brex was founded in 2017 by Enrique and Pedro. They're extremely young. I want to say that now they're approximately 23 and 24 years old. A fun fact about Pedro and Enrique is they actually met over Twitter because they were arguing about a video game code. Prior to that, Pedro had been the first Brazilian to jailbreak the iPhone and have Siri speak Portuguese. So he had that under his belt already. And then there he was on Twitter surfing the web and met his co-founder of what is now a $12.3 billion company. The reason this is relevant is because Pedro and Enrique joined forces early on in Brazil to create an additional payments company. It was like the Stripe for Brazil. Called Pagar.me. They successfully exited this company in Brazil like prior to going to college and realized that they had already built a company and sold one and hadn't gone to school yet. So they decided to head to the Bay Area, hedge their bets with Stanford. Luckily they got in, but they had this entrepreneurial spirit that couldn't keep them in the classroom and wanted them to be outside and developing and continuing their entrepreneurial direction. And so what happened next was really interesting. They wanted to create a VR company because the VR space was pretty big in 2017, but quickly they realized they were bigger competitors than what they had anticipated, to the tune of Facebook that were making VR headsets. And so something that they ran into trouble while trying to create this company was getting access to a credit card in America. So they didn't have a social security number. They didn't have any sort of cash collateral to put down at the time because they were still looking for investors and they still didn't have much money for their VR fund, or I'm sorry, VR company. And every bank that they tried to go to get a traditional credit card for was asking them for all of those things that they didn't have. So it was really hard. They put their heads together and realized VR is probably not the space that they should be working in. It's probably still payments based on their track history in Brazil. And they hedged to solve this problem for early stage founders to get access to a corporate credit card that's super easy to use, doesn't require any sort of personal guarantee, has all of the technology and spend management that you would ever need to grow a company built in, and then obviously rewards to tailor specifically to these founders. And so our mission is to help reimagine financial operating systems so every growing company can realize their full potential. And it truly started from our founders experiencing this firsthand. And so to make this a bit more relevant to this audience, I'd just like to highlight our products, but then go a little bit further into our NetSuite integration. So at our core, as I mentioned, we do offer a corporate credit card for funded startups and now actually for larger companies that would fit the NetSuite user profile. So at our core, we are purpose-built for venture-backed companies, but this is because our underwriting model bases credit lines off of a bank account balance rather than credit worthiness. So we offer 10 to 20 times higher limits than any sort of standard bank that would issue a business credit card because we leverage the bank account balance for this. With that, you get a very large limit with no personal guarantee, build business credit, and then have access to our extremely robust dashboard that integrates with major ERPs to the tune of NetSuite and a few others. But what we find is that controllers, accountants, CFOs absolutely love our NetSuite integration because they're saving hours and hours of time through manual work through our automated merchant categorization process and our integration. So you can imagine a growing company distributing cards, or an enterprise company now managing hundreds of corporate cards for hundreds to thousands of clients. There needs to be merchant categorization that easily translates over into NetSuite and automates this process to remove a lot of manual work. So we actually are the first corporate credit card to have a certified integration with NetSuite. Actually, I'll head over here. And the biggest highlight of our integration here is that with every card swipe, the integration with NetSuite can automatically categorize the merchants to the NetSuite chart of accounts and the general ledger. So for example, if an employee makes a Starbucks purchase, you can map that through your NetSuite classes to automatically categorize to restaurants. But then we have an even more granular merchant level mapping that includes different price tiers and different policies that you can do based on how large the transaction is versus, or the merchant categorization. And so we make this extremely robust and really easy to integrate with NetSuite and still operate completely out of NetSuite through the Brex integration. That being said, we work with companies of all sizes. We fundamentally offer a corporate credit card and a very large line of credit with a robust dashboard to manage the entire program with really great integrations with NetSuite. Companies from 2 employees all the way to 2,000 employees can leverage Brex to manage their corporate credit card spend. And so we work with people in a variety of ways. We have partnerships with groups like Rocky Mountain NetSuite User Group. We actually work directly with accounting firms and NetSuite implementation firms to help their clients get set up with Brex. We like to pride ourselves on making NetSuite advisors truly look like the hero by onboarding their clients to this tool to help reimagine their financial operations. And so if you're interested, wrapping up here, if you're interested in referring anybody to Brex or working directly with us or setting up a partnership, we're all ears. I realize in the sake of time, we didn't get too deep into all the details, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions, but we have a dedicated onboarding team to help onboard your referrals. We do have a special offer for members of the Rocky Mountain NetSuite User Group. We will ensure any referral gets a white glove onboarding experience. And if you're not quite ready to refer, we're just here to chat. So my name is Samantha. Again, I'm a partnerships manager here. I'd love to set up some calls with anybody who's interested in partnering with us. We have a robust referral program. Or if you have clients in mind that you think that could use a more robust credit solution, we're here to help. So I'll go ahead and send a lot of this information out as a follow-up, and I'm super excited to work with everybody. We are actually adding an extra bonus incentive for the first 10 people that do book meetings with us. You'll get a special Brex sponsored gift, but you'll find out once you reach out to us. I'll send all that details over. And so I really appreciate the time today, everybody. Not sure if we have too much time for Q&A, but I'll make sure everybody has a lot of the follow-up materials here so we can work individually.
All right. Thank you so much, Samantha. We appreciate your sponsorship of the user group. If there's any questions for Samantha, please feel free to post those in the chat window, or obviously you can send her an email directly. So we'll get back into our main presentation at this point. Ethan, you should be able to come back on. Maybe I need to make you presenter again, so let me just take a look at that. All right, Ethan, you should be able to present again. And I noticed that you are still muted.
Are you able to hear me now, guys?
Yep, we can hear you. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you. All right, so and we spent the first while kind of talking about what's new, a little bit about when you might use SuiteAnalytics Workbooks, a fair amount of time in the data set. So really what we want to do now is really hop right into the workbooks themselves and show you some of the different options there, show you how to manipulate those, and then we'll finish up with some use cases that you may have for kind of a couple things specifically, around financials with a little bit of cash. I wouldn't call it cash forecasting, but cash out and cash in sort of views, and then a little bit into some manufacturing. So talking just quickly about workbooks before we hop back into NetSuite. So workbooks are really going to be the ability to combine data sets, tables, pivot tables, and charts into a single tool that's going to use this new data analytics source that we've been talking about today. So as you can see here, and as you'll see when we hop into it, a single workbook, kind of like an Excel workbook, if you think of it from that perspective, is going to have a lot of different tabs to it. So you can combine things like table views, and a table view is going to be something like almost like a safe search sort of view, just displaying simply rows and columns, as well as pivots, and then the ability to do more kind of visualization-based analyses as well. So there are, similarly to like the templates that were provided from a data set perspective, most of those are also going to have some workbook templates that are provided by NetSuite as well. We're going to spend some time today in our sales ordered workbook, but you can see there's ones that are specific to items or more on the purchases side, or some things around warehouse inventory, inbound and outbound, and things of that nature. So again, these are just some templates from a workbook perspective where NetSuite's just kind of built out some basic pivots and visualizations that you can then either manipulate, or you can always obviously build things from scratch as well. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into back into NetSuite, and let's just kind of start at the most basic and look at some tables. So if we were to come in here to our sales ordered workbook, and you can see here I'm on my datasets tab, so I could either come in here and look and to see the datasets that, or the workbooks that are associated to this, or obviously can just go to my workbooks tab and come open that from here. So if I were to come in here, let's look at our sales ordered template that NetSuite provided, and we're going to kind of work from there a little bit. Really kind of starting most basically, again, from our table view. So as you create new tabs on this workbook, you're going to see that's where it's going to give you the ability to determine what type of visualization you want to do, whether that's a table, a pivot, or a chart. One thing to note as well is you can add multiple data sets into your workbook. Now, what that really means, this is not the dataset linking functionality that I was alluding to before, but this is essentially what just, if you wanted in a single workbook to say, all right, well, this table is going to reference this data set, and this table is going to reference, or this pivot is going to reference this data set. That's what this connect data set functionality is going to allow you to do. But it is not, just to be clear, that function of actually combining data sets. This is just allowing you to have more than one data set with it, so you don't have to have separate workbooks if you did want to have separate root records, in your different tabs here. So if I went back to my table view here, so remember, because we're not editing our data set right now, we are strictly editing what we're viewing. So if we were to add and remove columns from this view, this is not going to affect our underlying data set. This is only going to affect this specific view on this specific tab. So for instance, let's say, we're not, for whatever reason, we're not using location here. It's not tagged on anything. It's not useful in my view. I'm going to go ahead and just remove that. So I could do that by clicking on the three dots there and saying remove column. Or if I wanted to, I could come over here. Oh, actually, I'm thinking of a pivot. Apologies. So yeah, I'm just going to click up here on my three dots and say remove column. That's not something I want to see there again. Now, if that was something that I did want to add back, that's just something that I could grab here from my location, from my tab over here, and then add back here. One thing that you'll see here as well is whenever you add anything that has a parent-child relationship or a hierarchy to it, you're going to have the ability to either show just the, the very child level of that hierarchy, or you can actually have it show the entire hierarchy. So that's just something that you have the ability to add and or to add in either one, in either way when you're adding a column that is a hierarchy column or parent-child relationship column to any of your visualizations or tables or things of that nature. So very easy to add and remove columns. This also, you can drag and drop in terms of where you want to see those from a visual perspective. So that is something that you can do here as well. You can do advanced sorting as well. So, just from a most basic perspective, you're going to see here, I have my, I'm sorting by date from an ascending perspective. So you can see here at the top, the way that those are kind of formatted there, I'm sorting in an ascending way. If I click on that again, it's just going to sort that in a descending fashion. So that's just kind of a simple sort. If I wanted to add, a more advanced sort in terms of how I'm wanting to see this data, I can go ahead and hit my 3 dots here again, and this is where I can add a sort. So if I just go ahead and click Add Sort here, this is where I'm going to be able to come in here and determine my different levels of sorting here. So in this scenario, I'm saying I want to sort by a date first and then by transaction. But let's say, instead I wanted to sort by date first and then by customer. Just go ahead and add sort on my customer. I'm going to go ahead and just add that. If I wanted to add even another field, I can just hit add sorting, select the field that I want to sort by, whether I want to sort it in an ascending or descending fashion, or hit the trash can there just to remove that sort from my advanced sort. You also do, because some fields are not going to have values on them when you're trying to sort. So if you click this kind of little settings area here, you can have the ability to come in here and say, first of all, do I want this to be case sensitive? And then second of all, do I want to show any of my null values first? So if there are values that just don't exist for that field, do I want to have those null values go first? So just a couple things you can do there from a sorting perspective. If I wanted to say, I want to sort by customer first and then by date, I can just hit this up or down arrow, or drag and drop that to be able to change the order in which I'm sorting there. So a few things that you can do there from a sorting perspective. Additionally, you'll see I can do any sort of filtering that I want to do here as well. So let's say I wanted to filter by date. I can just, again, hit my 3 arrows right here and say filter. And you're going to see these are kind of similar to how you would do things from a safe search perspective. So I want to have dates within a specific range, or before, not on or before, not within. I can do relative dates. So if I'm going to say on or before, or on or after, I can have those days be days, weeks, or months or years in my relative dates. Or if I wanted to just do date ranges, I can do those by day, week, month, quarter, or year as well, or just specific values. This is a cool thing from a filtering perspective. Is any of these things that you're going to have, you can either filter by specific, kind of those specific ranges or relative dates or things of that nature, or you can come in here and actually just pick specific values. So show me all sales orders that happened on this specific date, or not on this specific date. I can add any of those as filters as well, as opposed to having those be more dynamic or based on relative ranges. So those filters, again, that's why when we talked about the original data sets that we recommended doing, that is because we can always continue to filter on any of those sorts of things once we're in our actual workbook.
Hey, Ethan.
So
can I interrupt? Okay. So the positive negative, someone's asking this, the positive negative for my transaction line quantity and transaction line amount data from invoices and credit memos are reversed. How do I change them?
That is a good question. That's actually not something that I've had thought of yet, but what I would anticipate maybe doing, and definitely open for feedback here, is maybe perhaps doing a case statement to say if it's this transaction type. So if it's a credit memo or a you know, a bill credit or something of that nature, take amount times -1, you know, else just take amount would be potentially a way to do that from a formula perspective. But that just maybe to get the best practice way of doing that might be something that I would need to do a little bit of testing on. But that just kind of top of head would be a way that I would potentially look at accommodating that, because as you're seeing, and based on your question, we're going to see, you know, from a debit and credit polarity perspective, that those are going to, you know, actually show based on what their actual values are by default.
Yeah, there was a follow-up question about, can you set amount as absolute? And I wouldn't recommend doing that, because your data won't be correct, because it'll do absolute on some things that you don't want it to, I think. So you have to be a little careful with that. But yeah, I'm surprised that, especially that you list that the invoices is backwards. I could see credit memos, and like you said, bill credits, Ethan, but invoices shouldn't be backwards. And so, yeah, I'm not sure why you're seeing that, Kenneth. I know in other safe searches, I've done what Ethan said, where he does the case statement to say, if it's this, then do an amount times -1. And it looks like he's working on that there.
Yeah, I don't see the ability to do an absolute amount here, but that doesn't mean that it isn't possible. So that's probably something that, again, could be accomplished through a formula. But in terms of a field, and that actually, you know, to be honest, and just because there's so much depth to this, I haven't gotten to each little nuance. But if I were to come and look at my data set again and come back to my different fields, because transaction line is going to be there, you know, I may have the ability to come in here. There may be an amount that is going to be, you know, amount that may be absolute, or an amount that would show in a way that would be, you know, in the correct polarity. So again, something we could follow up on, but you know, there are a fair amount of different amounts there, and if we get to our you know, our transaction accounting line as well, that may be something that you know, we'd have the ability to have some. And if not, again, there's always the ability to do those formulas with some case statements there. Yeah, great question though. All right, so if we go ahead and let's go back to our workbook here. So we talked a little bit about filtering, you know, kind of moving things around. You also have, like, and this is kind of probably more relevant when you get into, especially into pivots and things like that. You know, NetSuite gets very technical, you know, and it talks about how it's displaying things, you know, in terms of things like amount. So, you know, amount net, or if you're, you know, showing a transaction line, it's going to show, say, a transaction line amount net or something of that nature. You can always come in here and rename your fields very easily just by coming in here and renaming it. So if I just want to put amount, I can come in there and do that. So just a very simple way of coming in, renaming fields. So that's something that you can do there. If we wanted to come in here and then, you know, maybe filter by some things, like if we go back to our data set here really quick, and let's just say I want to add some additional things here, because, you know, this is a sales ordered. I want to get some insight into, you know, how we're fulfilling these. So if I come back to my transaction line, let's just say I want to add some different quantities here. So let's just say I want to take my quantity build. Let's go ahead and add that. And maybe our amount of quantity that's been shipped for any of those that are kind of inventory type items. So I can do that. And let's just go ahead and add our sales rep supervisor in here again, just for an additional field to have in there. So sales rep supervisor, let's add that back here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and, so you can see here, this is a native system template, and so it's, again, forcing me to do a save as. And if I don't want to, I can just go ahead and apply to my workbook. It is going to tell me that my data set's unsaved, so if I leave this page, I'm obviously going to lose any of my progress there because I haven't saved this data set yet after making my changes to it. So let's go ahead and add quantity build. Let's go ahead and add quantity shipped. See, this one obviously doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, quantity shipped /received /picked up. let's go ahead and say, you know what, I want to rename that just to quantity shipped. So now we've renamed that. So now we've got a quick view on all of our sales orders by item, by amount with our quantities, quantity billed, quantity shipped, who the sales rep is, what our class is. If we wanted to add maybe our sales rep supervisor, we can go ahead and add this over here. All right, so let's go ahead and filter. I want to see only quantities that that we haven't actually fulfilled any. So let's go ahead and filter this number, and we're going to say we do we want to show quantities that are going to be equal to 0 on our quantity shipped. So we have, these are going to be orders for items that we have not shipped anything on this line item yet. So now we can see there our quantity shipped is filtering out that to 0. We still can see our total quantities. You know, obviously it looks like we're not invoicing ahead of fulfillment here. Now let's add some conditional formatting. Again, this is another one of those new features that we're going to have the ability to you know, add some of this formatting to our conditional formatting to these tables here. So let's go ahead and take our amount, and we can go ahead and here and set conditional formatting. Let's go ahead and manage our conditional formatting. So I'm going to say, you know, anything between 25,000 and 99,000, just below 100,000, I want to make that orange here. So I can do these predefined colors, or I can, you know, pick my special colors here. But we're going to say I want to make this orange, or whatever kind of color that is. But I want to add another condition here. So I'm going to say anything $100,000 and above, I want to turn that red. All right, go ahead and do that and apply. Oh, I guess I probably should, let's just say this, I got to put another one. Or what I could do is I could say is greater than or equal to $100,000. Then I don't have to put a second one in there. So I'll go ahead and hit apply. As soon as it does that, this is going to refresh my table. You can see with my conditional formatting on my amounts here, you can see any of those amounts between 25 and 100,000 are going to be that yellow. Any amounts above that are going to turn red. If I wanted to add another column of conditionals, I can come over here. Let's say my quantity. I want to manage some conditional formatting of that. Let's say any quantity that's more than 25, greater than or equal than 25. We also can add some things, some icons, kind of like in Save Searches as well. So I can say, I'm going to just put a red flag on that to say, you know, we have, you know, these are large quantities of orders just from a quantity perspective, or items that we want to make sure that we're paying special attention to. So you can see here now I've added an additional level of conditional formatting on this column, you know, just by adding that icon next to my quantity here. So the conditional formatting, I know, was a feature that had been highly requested, and that is something that is now available for you to be able to just manage on a column by column basis, to be able to, you know, to manage that from a visual standpoint. All right, so that's just kind of some basics on a filter view, or sorry, on a table view. You can see right here, I can have the ability to export this data as a CSV file. So if I wanted to export that, I'll download that. I can open it into Excel, do any sort of additional analysis or manipulation there. Again, we talked about sharing workbooks, or sorry, data sets earlier. If I want to share my, just this workbook here, you can see here, first of all, it's not going to let me because I actually haven't saved the data set. But once I do save this data set, let's go ahead and save changes here. All right, now that I have saved this data set, I'm going to have the ability to share it out. So again, we can share out to different roles, to different employees, and sorry, I can now share out this workbook now that I have saved my data set. And again, just had that ability to export that to CSV. All right, so let's go ahead and hop to a pivot here. So you're going to see here now that I've switched my data set. It's essentially telling me that I'm kind of out of sync here. So it's coming here, it's refreshed now with my my new saved data set. And this is an example, just kind of that out of the box sales ordered pivot, and this is going to be showing me sales by item. So now that we're working in pivots, we are essentially going to be managing 3 different elements here. We're going to be managing our rows, we're going to be managing our columns, and we're going to be managing our measures here. So obviously rows, we're going to be showing anything that are going to be showing here with our values that are going to kind of aggregate across. So since we have 3 different values here in our rows, we're looking at by class, by location, by item, and our columns are going to be by transaction type. Now I've filtered this to just be sales orders, so that's why we're only seeing sales orders here. But if, let's say, we had other sorts of things, maybe we want to have credit memos next to this because we're going to have multiple transaction types, or maybe we've booked some sales in cash sales or journals or things of that nature, we would be able to see those additional transaction types as additional columns there as well. And then our measures are going to be what show individually among our different columns here. So we're going to be able to see our quantity, we're summing our quantity, and we are summing our amount here. If we want to rename these, we can come just like we did on our table view and rename and just say, you know what, I don't want all that extra technical jargon in there. I just want amount. All right, same thing with quantity. I just want to view quantity here. You may want to keep sum in there just so you know that it's a sum, but you may already know that because we're in a pivot here. Let's just go ahead and rename this to quantity as well. One thing, I'm going to hop back to my data set, and because this is a good time for us to talk a little bit about calculated measures, which is an additional new feature, in recent releases. And it's important for us to differentiate a formula field from a calculated measure. And so if we think about a formula field is just going to show in essentially, like if we're looking at something in terms of something like a percentage, it's going to show when we look at things from an aggregated view, it's going to show us an average, or a sum or whatever we're doing, whatever we're applying to that of those percentages that are going to be displayed on that data set. However, with calculated measures, the amount is going to be calculated by aggregating the values together and displaying those in aggregate. So as an example, let's go ahead, see in my my scenario here, we have estimated gross profit is in my data set. And let's just say we actually wanted to look at our profit percentage based on our amount or estimated gross profit divided by our amount. So if we were to come in here and add a formula, and let's just say like GP percentage, and we're just going to call this formula. And let's just say we want to come in here and say, I'm going to take my estimated gross profit, and I could come in here and search for my fields down here. Estimated gross profit, I can just click on that or double click on that, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to divide that by my amount. So just a simple formula there. Because this is going to be a percentage, I'm going to change my output type to percentage. Just kind of an FYI there, if you are doing a currency, that's going to need to be float because it's going to have a decimal in it as opposed to an integer. So if you try to save something that's a currency and you try to save it as an integer, it's going to pop you an error here. But we want to calculate this as a percent. Let's validate this really quick. We're good to go. Let's go ahead and hit save. So now we have a new formula in here for gross profit percentage. So let's go ahead and add that to our data set here. Now, if we go ahead and save this and let's apply it to our workbook. So it's going to be an available field here now. So now we can come in here and add as a measure our gross profit percentage. However, what you can see here, first of all, it's going to be way off because it's trying to do it as a sum. But let's say we wanted to do this as an average. Again, this is just going to calculate an average of our gross profit, not the actual total of our gross profit in aggregate. So it is not going to be an accurate gross profit percentage. So if we come down here right now, it's saying that our gross profit percentage is 75.38%. All right, if we were to come in here and actually add our gross profit field, which it looks like I forgot to add that. So let's go ahead and hop back to our data set really quick, and I'm going to go ahead and add for my transaction my estimated gross profit. And I'm going to go ahead and apply that back to my workbook. And I'm going to add that as a measure back here. So estimated gross profit is here now. We can see here estimated gross profit. We can see here what the actual formula is. But if we come down here and look at our aggregated total here, and actually this is going to give you a good chance to show a couple of other features because I couldn't tell which column was which or couldn't remember it. You're going to have the ability here to do a couple of different things. First of all, you can determine where you want to display subtotals and grand totals. So you can see here, I'm not subtotaling things by my class or my location or by my item or anything like that. Whoops. If I wanted to change that, I could just click on this and I'm going to say, you know what, I want to show my subtotals by either my different rows or my different columns. So if I wanted to subtotal my row by class, or if I wanted to do other sorts of subtotals for my columns, I can add those here as well. So if I went ahead and added my subtotal for class, you're going to see here it's going to add a subtotal at the, let's see here, where did I add that? I think I must have clicked the wrong button there. So that's technically going to give you the ability to then to be able to subtotal by different areas in which you are aggregating together from your pivot from a pivot perspective. You're also going to be able to enable and disable active column highlighting. So if you're highlighting a different column or a different row, you're going to be able to enable and disable that. And then we can also freeze our column headers and our row headers. So if I want to go ahead and do that, when I scroll down, I'm going to be able to see what those are still here at the top. So if I go ahead and scroll down, and you can see here, I had switched my grand total to show here on the top. So let's go ahead and fix that. Right bottom here. So what I'm trying to point out here is, so we have our, we're going to have our totals here, and we're going to have our, estimated gross profit. And we're going to have our formula here, but this amount is just not going to, it's not going to be the correct amount because it's taking our average. Another thing that you'll see here is we're still looking at these amounts here from a formula perspective. So if I want to come in here from an amount standpoint, I'm going to go ahead and apply my conversion. So that's going to put all of that into USD here. By default, that's going to use today's date, all right, as your conversion date from a currency perspective. Because again, we're not looking at transaction accounting lines; we're just looking at transaction lines based on the currency of the transaction. So you can see here now we have our $41 million is our total. Our estimated gross profit is $27 million. And our gross profit percentage is 75.38%. Now, if we come here and actually look at this, and we're taking our, our 27,214,248, and dividing that by our total amount, that's 66.36%. So our gross profit's wrong. And that's because we're using that formula field as opposed to a calculated measure. So now if we were to actually create a calculated measure, and what we can do here is we're going to call this gross profit percentage, and we'll just call it calculated measure. And we can come in here and put that definition in here. Now you can come in here and you can double click these or whatever, but you can also hit Control Space, and that's going to allow you to come select from your fields. So if we're going to take our estimated gross profit, and I can also get my operators in here. Let's say we're going to divide that by our total amount. All right, we're going to go ahead, and if I were to apply this right now and go look at that, it's going to give me an error because our amounts, again, in multi-currency. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a conversion here proactively. Go ahead and hit save. All right, and now we're going to have our actual calculated measure of our gross profit percentage. Now you can see here, it's just showing here is more of a standard decimal field. What I can come in here and do is take this, I can format it and say, you know what, this is actually going to be a percentage, and I wanted to use 2 decimal places. If I wanted to override that, I could do that there as well, but we'll go ahead and hit OK. So now we're going to see correctly aggregated at each level here what our gross profit percentage is here. And you're going to see it that if we come down here and look at our total calculated measure down here, if we went back to our calculator and looked, we would that's our 66.36% of taking this estimated gross profit against our total amount. So that's really kind of the beauty of the calculated measure, is the ability to take an amount that's going to be aggregated by the values and then performing the division as opposed to the way we talked about from a formula perspective. So yeah, so those are some things from just a kind of a pivot table perspective. You really have the ability to come in here and manipulate your rows and your columns and your measures based on how whatever you're needing to get out of that report. So if I go ahead, since we're only looking at sales orders, I removed sales orders from our columns. But let's just say we wanted to bring our sales rep supervisor in here. If I brought that in as a column, now we're going to have a quick analysis on our amounts and quantities and estimated gross profits by each one of our sales reps supervisors, using that as the top area of our pivot. We can also export these, another new feature, to CSV for manipulation in Excel. So if I wanted to download that, I could come in there and open this, and it's going to export that for me to be able to do additional analysis in Excel. All right. So that's just kind of a little bit about that. You do, again, have the ability to come in here and do changing our summary types. So if I'm wanting to look at averages or counts or mins and maxes, we're going to have the ability to do that. So that's something that we can do. Again, this is where we're going to manage any sort of conversion that we need to do here as well. If I'm wanting to come in here and do some filters, I can do that. I can filter these amounts as well. So you have some additional things that you can do, again, from a conditional formatting and a filtering perspective on a field-by-field basis. All right, so let's hop into some charts here. So if I were to come in here and let's go ahead and look at sales by sales rep. So we have a few different options here when we're looking at our different visualizations. And you can see here by default, the way that the amounts were set here is I have not been set to apply my conversions. So if I come in here and say currency and apply conversion, that's where it's going to now be able to populate my data because we're now applying that conversion to my multi-currency environment here. So a couple things here, just as you saw here right now, by default, this template was showing by essentially by date and by quarter. So that's what's going to show here on my x-axis is the combination of that. My color stack. So I'm doing a stacked column chart. We can either do basic, column, bar, area, or line. And from a stacked perspective, we can do column, bar, or area. So essentially, whatever we're selecting here in the central field, that's either going to show as a series when we're looking at this, or if we're on a stacked chart, it's going to show, obviously stacked in here. So right now, we're just looking at by these specific dates on our x-axis, by our sales rep on our color stack, and we're looking for essentially total sum amount. We have the ability to quickly look at our sales rep performance on a quarterly basis. Now, if we wanted to come change this and say, you know what, actually I want to look at this on a monthly basis, I can come in here and expand this out, and now I can come look at this at on a monthly basis. On a monthly basis. So you can see here we're looking at month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, 6, all the way through there. You can see here, because I do have this kind of in my series from a date perspective, if I didn't actually want to see that quarter in there, I can just come remove this by hitting the garbage can there, and I'm going to actually be able to see that by just by month and by year. So again, this is going to show you in kind of in any way that you want to see those dates. And let's say we want to see things for all years, you know, broken out by month. All I have to do is remove year for my x-axis, and now this is going to show me by month. So if I'm wanting to kind of see trends, you know, for all combined years of data in my data set, I'm going to be able to see that here. We have some transactions here that are not filtered by or not assigned to a specific sales rep. Maybe we don't want to see those. We can just click this box on any of these, and it's going to take those out of my view here. So now I'm only seeing things that are actually assigned to a specific sales rep. Again, we're back to our kind of our ugly naming convention. So let's go ahead and rename this just to maybe sales amount. Go ahead and hit OK. Now it's going to show those instead of all that extra stuff there. We're going to be able to see that, you know, just by each individual sales rep with our sales amount. Another cool feature of these are you can actually show these as a percentage. So instead of actually showing, you know, what these kind of from a bar graph perspective in terms of, you know, the totals, we can show this a percentage to show up from our color stack perspective how much of those make up a total of our aggregate amount. So you can see here again, if I filter out sales rep, I can see between Will, Jen, and Alex who's making up kind of a total of our sales amount, you know, on a monthly basis here. So kind of a cool way just to be able to visualize that. You know, you can still highlight over and see what those total sales amounts are, or what each one of those are, but it is going to allow you to kind of see those individually as a total 100% amount, you know, on whatever we're looking at from an x-axis perspective. You also will see, you know, this is going to show some default values up here in terms of how we're naming this chart. So if I actually go to my properties here, I can update this to say, you know what, I want to do sales by month. So I can update what that says. You can see there that's going to update this, as well as the subtitle. If we wanted to update that as well by sales rep, you know, maybe we call them BDMs. We can just say this sales by month by BDM. And then you also have the ability to come in here and name your X or your Y axis. So let's get rid of that net amount as well. And then maybe our x-axis we want to name month. So you have some manipulations, ways that you can do there to be able to kind of change how you see that, you know, just in terms of the overall formatting of this chart. And again, this is something that we can go share. We can export to an SVG file. So if you're wanting to maybe dump this into something, I can download this. And just as an example, I'll open this in Firefox. So that's something that you can then export. Maybe you wanted to dump it into you know, an Excel workbook or something as a picture, or throw it into a PowerPoint presentation or something. But that is something that you can then export, you know, the actual SVG file of that for use others. You know, you can always do a screenshot there if you want to do that as well. So if we come out, take off our percentage again, let's go ahead and switch this. If we're wanting to, instead of looking at a stacked column chart, maybe we're wanting to go back to a basic and actually show each one of those sales reps as an individual column of these, instead of them having be stacked as part of that each individual month on a bar by bar basis. So you can see here, again, let's get rid of our nail sales rep. Now we can see individually, you know, for each one of those months broken out, which one of each one of those looks like. Maybe we're wanting to then also, you know, filter by a specific class of how we're selling in specific areas of our business. We can come in here, we'll click on our class field because that's part of our data set, click on filter class, and then we can come in here and say, you know what, I want to look at things just for class A. Go ahead and hit apply. Now it's going to refresh my, it's going to refresh this, and now I'm going to be looking at just sales by month by BDM for that one specific class. So it looks like for class A, Will Clark is our only sales rep that's selling anything until we have a little bit in here in, you know, in October of last year. Or of October in general here, you know, in terms of how that is the data that's seeded in my demo data set. So you can do some additional cool things there from a filter perspective. If you want to, it's always going to show you which filters you have up here. If you want to remove it, you can just hit the trash can on that. Or maybe you want to just see all of your orders that are or your sales that are meeting a certain estimated gross profit percentage. I can come in here and I can filter this as well. And actually, I think there was a separate way I had to do this. I apologize. I lost track on where I was at in my notes here. So this is actually going to show me my individual values here. But I believe if we had it in our formula field, we could actually do it as a greater than. There we go. So we've got our formula field here. So if we want to say, show me only orders that have a gross profit of more than 65%, I can now apply that. And now I'm looking at sales by sales rep by month, and it's only going to show me sales that have a gross profit of greater than a certain percentage there. So kind of another cool thing you can do there just from a filtering perspective. If I wanted to switch these to a different kind of visualization, again, you can add those as a bar chart as opposed to columns. So you can kind of see them visually and from that perspective. Same thing as if you're wanting to do, area graphs or line graphs, you can do that as well. And then from a stacked perspective, you can have the ability to do, have those show as different color stacks in your areas, columns and bars as well. So if I were to come here and change this to, a stacked area graph, again, it's going to keep my color stack here, and I'm going to be able to kind of see how those all work out for my different sales reps that are down here. So that's kind of just a basic walkthrough of kind of some of the columns, some of the different visualizations you can do from both a pivot, a table, and then some of the different bar and chart visualization tools with messing around with your measures, your color stacks, and your different axes. And then some of the different manipulations you can do from a filtering standpoint, and then also how you want things to display from a kind of more of an overall display standpoint. The last thing I'm going to hop in here real quick, and I know we're kind of running short on time. I want to just go through a couple quick practical use cases. So one of the ones that NetSuite is going to provide is called our Suite Success Cash Outlay. So if I kind of go to my workbook here, you're going to see here, there's one here that's just called Suite Success Incoming, Outgoing, Future Cash Outlay. And this is going to be something that I can see that is going to show me essentially by all of my AP coming due and all of my AR that's coming due, kind of a little bit of a visualization in terms of what that's going to look like. So this is actually kind of an example of a little bit more of a complex data set. So if I were to come hop over to my data set here, you can see here that, first of all, this is one example of having a criteria that is really more of an expression-based criteria where we have a couple of ands and a couple of criteria groups that have some ands and then some ors in them. So we're saying, essentially, transaction line is going to be main line. We're going to be looking at bills and invoices that are in a certain status. We're going to be looking at the amount of unpaid for the transactions that are greater than $0. So kind of have some criteria in here that are going to make sure that we're only displaying the transactions that we want to display, as well as some complex formula fields, which are going to help us aggregate together the amounts kind of in our different bands so that we can have an idea of when those things are coming on due. So you can see here in this scenario, we have some different AP and AR formulas that are going to show, and these are, again, a bunch of case statements saying essentially we have a vendor bill or a vendor credit that's, the current date is between 7 and 14. Then this is, the due date minus the current date is between 7 and 14. That's what I want to show in this specific band. So again, that's an example of some more complex formulas that are going to be able to get you data within your data set, which then you can come back to your workbook and then help visualize. So as an example, if I were to come here to my incoming and outgoing future cash flow graph here, this is going to show me, again, this is going to be formatted by week, what my AP cash outgoing and my AR cash incoming is going to be based on due dates. So just kind of a quick way to be able to visualize outgoing cash and incoming cash based on due dates of transactions that are sitting in the system from an AR and an AP perspective. So some cool things that you can do there, just kind of from a practical use case perspective. You know, because I know obviously NetSuite's always kind of struggled some from a cash forecasting standpoint, and while this is not a cash forecasting tool, it at least kind of give you a little bit of an idea of some incoming and outgoing future cash outlay. Additionally, from a there are a few other visualizations on here. So, you know, maybe if you wanted an AP summary, we've got this has been a pivot's been built here so that you can have your entity, so the vendor show by your as your rows, and then kind of the amount, almost just kind of a replication of an aging report. And then if you maybe wanted to see, you know, just your specific AP outbound amount by week. Again, this is similar to our overall summary, but this is just going to be showing AP only. So it's not actually showing the AR inbound, you know, on the other side of this. Or kind of lastly, if you wanted to look at just a quick view of your top customers by inbound amount, that is something that you can just populate this, and it's going to show us our kind of our top customers here by the amount that's going to be owed. That's one thing that I hadn't actually touched on yet, is the ability to kind of do top, kind of top X. So if I wanted to come in here and say, I wanted to see, you know, the top amount, you can see here I have entity by total amount. I want to actually filter, and I want to show my top 5 by this amount. So if I wanted to say I wanted to show top 10, I could do that as well. But this is kind of give the ability for any of those measures to take your top amounts, so that you can kind of see those outliers, or, you know, any of those top things, kind of almost like a SQL query from that perspective. And then really quick, I'm going to switch environments just to show you on from a manufacturing perspective, you know, a potential use case as well. So there are in manufacturing workbooks, you know, if you wanted to do potentially some labor cost analysis, that's something that you could do, you know, in terms of being able to look at your different amounts of labor by, you know, operator or by employee, things of that nature. So if I were to come in here, let me zoom in a little bit, hit my analytics, and then hop over to my manufacturing workbook. There is a workbook in this environment that's a work order labor cost analysis. So if I were to drill down into that workbook, we're going to see here there's going to be a couple of different things that we can look at. One of those is going to be essentially by a labor cost analysis, which is going to be more of a just a standard table, which is going to show us essentially this is a if I were to come back and look at my data set, this is going to be based on this is more of an advanced manufacturing data set, so this is looking at production labor. But if I were to come back to my workbook here, this is showing my work orders, you know, the item that's being worked on, the work center, what's happening from an operations standpoint, the employee that's completed that, kind of what their operator code was, what the time was that they tracked to that specific manufacturing task, and then the actual labor dollar amounts based on, you know, rates that are set up on that manufacturing record. So if I wanted to come here and look at my labor dollars by work order, you can see here this is an example of a pivot, which is going to essentially show by work order and assembly item, work center and labor code, being able to break that out and look at labor hours, what our rates are, what our actual dollar amounts are. So kind of a cool aggregation here too, to be able to see, you know, by work order and by, you know, obviously the work order is going to have a single item on it, you know, what those are going to look like, what our total amounts are, kind of from a pivot standpoint. Or maybe I'm wanting to come here and look at labor dollars by employee. So similar sort of view here, but I'm going to be looking at, you know, total amount, again, looking at work order here specifically, but maybe we want to remove work order from that and then just look at specific employees. Let's go ahead and remove work order, work center, even operation name and labor code. And now let's just look at our individual employees, how many labor hours with their base rate and actual labor have been performed, against these, those work orders we're looking at here at more of an aggregated value. So just another sort of use case where you can then, again, just take base NetSuite data by using the underlying data structures that we talked about earlier today, being able to aggregate those together, in a way that you can perform analysis based on, in this specific scenario, production data that's being gathered from an advanced manufacturing perspective. Last thing I want to show you here is going to be, I'm going to hop back to my other environment, is going to be the the ability to add your visualizations to a dashboard. And you can see here I actually have a couple on here already, but you will see as you're doing personalized dashboard that you're going to have the ability to add an analytics portlet right to your dashboard. So you can see here, on my administrator center here, just my home, I already have 2 on there. So you have the ability to actually add 10 total analytics portlets to this dashboard. But you can actually add those analytics portlets to any of your center tabs or center dashboards, individually. So those are things that can just be added there. You can see here, this is a good use case for us to be using cached data sets instead of every time having to query NetSuite for most up-to-date data. We can have that rely on our dataset cache. And really it's as simple as adding our analytics portlet, coming in here and hitting setup. And this is going to show us where we can filter by our types, whether it's a pivot, a chart, or a table, where we can then come add this based on any of those that we have access to in our environment. We can come add those, maybe we want to see sales by sales rep from an invoice perspective. You can choose short, medium, or tall from a height standpoint. You can give it a custom name if you'd like to. But once you select that, it's just a matter of hitting save. That's going to add to our dashboard view here. And you can then actually make a couple of little tweaks here once that's showing here in terms of how you want to see the data and if you want to actually see it as a percentage as opposed to a total as we just looked at here a second ago. So you do have you're not going to be doing a lot of manipulation to the specific, to the workbook itself once that's on here, but you will have the ability to to at least make a couple quick tweaks in terms of the type of way that it's going to be showing that data to you. And it looks like I must be having an issue there in terms of that displaying, but you can get the idea here. If I were to scroll down here, this is an example. This one has suite people in this environment. So we're looking at, employee roster with, average base wage by department and location. So you can see here where I can tweak around a little bit with how I'm actually seeing this data right on my dashboard from that visualization. All right. So just to kind of do a really quick recap, from an overall presentation standpoint, what we talked about today was really starting off with those data sets, how you create the data sets or manipulate existing data sets, talking about the analytics data source, and some of the different things that you can do from that perspective, not only within workbooks, but other sorts of things like SuiteQL and SuiteScript and REST API. Went over kind of what workbooks are and how you can add different visualizations based on tables, pivots, charts, and graphs. Really quickly went through a couple practical use cases with the time we had remaining, and then touched quickly how you can add those to dashboard visualization. So I think, Corey, that's all I had from a presentation perspective. I do have a couple of minutes here that I can stay on before I do have, unfortunately, a hard stop to hop onto another meeting, but appreciate everybody's time today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ethan. That was a awesome presentation. And again, for everybody, this is recorded and we'll be posting it on our website along with the slide deck as well. We have our tips and tricks coming up from Morgan Franklin Consulting. It is related to SuiteAnalytics as well. And then I did post the checkout keyword in the chat window there since we ran a little bit over. So you can go ahead and check that out. So again, Ethan, thank you so much. This was a great presentation, and let's go ahead and turn it over to Morgan Franklin Consulting for our tip and trick. And Lane, will you be sharing your screen then?
Yes, I just need you to make me the presenter.
Yep, give me just one moment here. Gotta find you in the list, okay. All right, you should be able to present now. Perfect.
Great. And I'm going to be presenting with my colleague Sarah today. Sarah, just want to make sure you are hearing us.
Yep, hearing you guys. Can you hear me?
Gotcha. Yep.
Awesome. All right, let's get started then. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to go over some tips and tricks for SuiteAnalytics today, specifically the use case of creating a workbook to monitor transaction volume. So we can just jump right into it.
Sorry, trying to go. There we go.
Awesome. The agenda's short and sweet. We're just going to introduce ourselves and we're going to jump right into the use case. So quick introduction about ourselves. Lane and I are your presenters today. My name is Sarah. I'm a NetSuite manager at Morgan Franklin Consulting, and I've been with the firm for about 3 years now. I focus on NetSuite implementations, enhancements, and support for our customers. I work closely with clients from a variety of industries, including software, manufacturing, and nonprofit. And prior to my current role, I was an implementation consultant at Oracle NetSuite, where I used to work on NetSuite implementations as well. We're super excited to be able to share some of our expertise with you today, and I'll pass it on to my colleague, Lane.
Hi, all. My name is Lane Darwin. I'm a NetSuite manager at Morgan Franklin Consulting as well. Been working with NetSuite for over 6 years. I am based in Denver, and I've been in the as a NetSuite consultant now since I started. Jumped around the consulting world a bit, but been with Morgan Franklin now about 2 years, focusing on implementations, also health checks and optimizations. And I've worked across an array of industries, including software services, consumer products, life sciences, and more. So looking forward to presenting our tips and tricks.
Great, so just a little bit about our company. Morgan Franklin is a NetSuite Alliance partner, and in a nutshell, we are the consulting arm for our parent company, Vaco, and Vaco helps our clients with staffing, talent search, and consulting in multiple industries. We also have locations all over the country, including Denver, of course, and within the Morgan Franklin Consulting family, we have a NetSuite-specific practice where folks like Lane and I will assist our clients with NetSuite-specific needs. Cool. Now on to the topic of today's discussion. We will be providing a demo on how, how to monitor your transaction volume using NetSuite analytic tools. Our use case involves a real request that we received from a client that needed to have more visibility into their transaction volume on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. So we will show you how to use the SuiteAnalytics Workbook to give real-time visibility into transactions and to use the pivot table functionality using the count function of the transaction's internal IDs. So at the end of this, you should be able to see that the users can use the workbook to identify trends in transaction volume and help them better manage the resources available and to set their schedules accordingly.
All right, jumping back here.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so just a quick overview on the key terms. We already covered most of this in the presentation prior to this one, so I'm just going to go over this quickly for those who are watching via the recording. To recap, the SuiteAnalytics Workbook tool allows its users to create workbooks using analytics data in your NetSuite system. You have your data set, which is the basis for the workbook, and then you also have the actual workbook, which you are analyzing the results of your data set, and then you can create visualizations such as tables, charts, and pivot tables. And then on to permissions, again, also covered earlier, so just quick overview. These are some of the key permissions you need to give to the users to access the workbooks listed. And then on the workbook side, you need to give access to SuiteAnalytics. And for administrators, you need to give them access to analytics and administrator permission. Now I'm going to pass this on to Lane to walk us through the actual demo.
Thanks, Sarah. So this presentation has a good amount of screenshots, step-by-step, to assist in actually creating your data set and workbook. So I think it complements Ethan's earlier presentation with a good, simpler example. So for those that haven't had a lot of experience playing around, when you go back to look at the recording, you can use these screenshots to try and build this yourself and get some more familiarity with building your data set and subsequently viewing your data set in a visualization of the workbook. So to start us off, you would go into your NetSuite environment, and presuming you have the right role, you would click on the Analytics sub-tab, which will bring you to the ability to create a new workbook. So you can see we have our Analytics tab in the menu and the new workbook button on the right side once you are under that menu option. Once you're in the workbook, you're going to create your data set by clicking New Data Set. As Ethan mentioned earlier, there are some templates already available. So we use for our monitoring transaction volume, the My Transaction dataset as the root record for building our workbook. As we're looking at transaction volume, we're going to use the transaction root record. Once you click your data set, it actually makes you click the root record. So as I just mentioned, you would select transaction as your root record. And then you're going to define your data set. So again, once you are in the data set, you can drag and drop, as Ethan had shown earlier. In this case, we have our date, internal ID, transaction, and type. Those that are highlighted in blue are indicated as actually being applied to your data set, and you can just drag and drop them to the right. Column order is not really important, as really when you're evaluating your data set, you're doing that through a workbook, which you can tinker with the visualizations at that time. And then you would also drag in your criteria summary. So in this case, in our screenshot here, we have dragged and dropped the date as the timeline in which we want to view our transaction volume. So in this example, we have after 1/1/2017. When I jump into NetSuite to show you the one I created, I did it after 2018. Obviously, you can tinker with how you need to view your data, whether it be this year or include prior years. And let me jump to the next slide. Once you build your data set, on the top right of your data set, you'll apply that to your workbook. And then once you're creating your workbook, you'll actually pick your visualization type, which you can have multiple. For this example, we'll show you our pivot table and also a chart. And then when you're building your workbook, so once you select your visualization type, such as a pivot table, you will use the layout menu to actually build how you want those results to look. So in this example, for monitoring transaction volume, we've set our transaction type as the row, our date, in this case, we use the year as our columns, as well as the measure, which we're using the count by internal ID to determine the volume per transaction type. So here you can see once these are dragged into the layout section, the pivot table automatically starts to show results. And in this case, you can see 2017, 2018, 2019, and so on, the different transaction count for these types. You can use additional filters and sorting functionality to expand and tinker with the timeline. So in this case, the screenshot is showing that if you wanted to instead view by quarter, you'd be able to switch that to using the 3 dots next to the date filter, and then you view it by quarter instead of year. As mentioned before, one of the other visualization types is a chart. So this is just showing that you do have the ability to also create the transaction volume by chart, which I'll show you in a minute in NetSuite, and also add some filters to highlight different types of transactions for ease of visual purposes. Lastly, and I know Ethan covered this as well, and I'm going to show you from 2 different roles. If you share a data set or workbook, you can share it either by role or by employee. NetSuite does recommend doing it by role. However, if you share it with someone that doesn't have the same access as you, so for example, if I'm an administrator and I share it to an AP clerk, If they're going to look at transaction volume, they're only going to see what their role allows them to see. So if you have in your administrator view, the number of transactions of invoices and AR related transactions, that AP clerk, because they're focused on the accounts payable side in the system, is only going to be able to view, purchase orders, bills, and things related to their process area. So I actually gave myself the AP clerk role, and I'm going to show you that restriction. Lastly here, this is just showing a screenshot of when you actually give access to the system, give access in the system to a workbook, how you can select either roles or employees, and then you'd be able to give them that permission to be able to go in and view a workbook. So I'm going to actually jump into NetSuite quickly to look at our actual monitored transaction volume pivot table that I had created and align with this presentation. So you can see here on the top right, I am in my administrator role. So I'm going to click on my analytics tab. And I have this filtered under my workbooks. If you click all workbooks, you can see some of the other templates in the system, but for ease of identifying, I'm going to click my monitoring transaction volume under my workbooks. And now you can see we have two visualizations already built. We have a data set called monitoring transaction volume as well that we've pulled in the different values of date, entity, internal ID, transaction, and type, which are now being applied to our actual pivot table visualization. And you can see here I have, in this case, on the pivot on the data set I did after 2018, where in our screenshot we had after 2017. So you can see our 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021 transaction count for each of these transactions listed on the left here. And then if I jump into our chart just by clicking on the other tab, which is another visualization type, you can see not as ideal for viewing since there's quite a lot of different transaction types and it can make it small. But if you click on, say I wanted to remove invoices, the chart actually adjusts for what's left in the visualization itself. So if I put that back, one of the other things I could do is use my three dots to only view the top 10 highest number of transaction volume. So when I do this, it's a lot less cluttered. If I put my chart definitions to the side, it opens it up a little bit. So just something to keep in mind when if you're working with a lot of data and using this tool, it becomes a lot easier using your different filters and top 10 options, bottom 10 options to be able to better visualize your data if needed. Last thing here, I'm going to jump into, I have an AP clerk role to show you the limitation. So I shared this workbook with this AP clerk role, and I assigned myself the AP clerk role for the purpose of this demonstration. And I'm going to go look at that same workbook from that AP clerk role and show you how it is limited in what I can view. So it's loading my pivot table, and you can see here the number of transactions on the left are really just on the AP side of the procure to pay module. And I'm not seeing all of those invoices and other transactions that as an admin, you pretty much can see everything in the system. So just wanted to point that out when you are working and you're trying to share this to additional users in your company, to keep in mind that they might not be able to see unless they have the SuiteAnalytics administrator role, which NetSuite recommends you only give to a select few that are really kind of in the ins and outs of the workbook module. And that's the end of our presentation. If you have any questions, on the presentation, feel free to shoot Sarah and I an email. It's just our first name dot last name at morganfranklin.com. And appreciate the time. Thanks to Ethan for the deep dive earlier today. And thanks to the Rocky Mountain NetSuite User Group Board for giving us the chance to present tips and tricks today.
Great. Thank you so much, Lane and Sarah. We appreciate you presenting that tip and trick. So we have a little bit of time left. We'll go ahead and move into the open forum section of our meeting. Basically, if anybody has any questions or challenges that they have not been able to solve, maybe as a group we can help you out or at least point you in the right direction. So I'm going to, you can post your question or comment in the chat
You could also unmute yourself if you would like to speak. So we'll go ahead and open it up.